for a moment of silence, and then Ms. Feathers, our Vice President, will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please stand. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight, and we're going to start with recognitions. And at this time, Coach Jason Schnapp. Okay, Coach Jason Schnapp, please come up and give us and bring your young archers as well.
Sure.
Please.
Where would you like me to?
Wherever so people can see.
Sure.
I like the back of the air.
Oh, no.
Because it's right up big.
Yeah. Tell you what, if you guys want to go there first, I'll introduce you guys. That way, everybody gets your names. All right. Good evening, Mr. Superintendent, Board, community members. I am very honored to be here tonight to recognize my team, the Anchor Point Archery team. These kids are absolutely phenomenal in every single way that you can imagine, from an athletic standpoint, academic standpoint, character, passion, just work ethic. These kids are phenomenal. I can't tell you enough about them. They're just amazing. We started this team about 2 years ago, and in a short period of time frame, we went from a state champion last year to 13 individual championships this year. These kids are excellent. To show you an example, they can shoot ping pong balls at 60 and 70 yards. I would not want to be in front of them. They have precision upon precision. Some of these kids have just started shooting within the past year, and they have excelled tremendously. We start from November, December time frame and end in August. And we go all the way up and down the East Coast essentially. Our last shoot is at the World Championships in August. And this past year we were able to have a young gentleman finish 4th in the Worlds, so top 5 for that. And a young lady as well finished 6th in points. And then we had numerous kids in the top 10, top 15, so they excelled tremendously. I wanted to bring examples of what some of these kids are able to do. Can't bring all their accomplishments, so to speak, but this is an example of what a Robin Hood looks like. So if you've seen the movie with Robin Hood, this is essentially it. Put one arrow inside another arrow from different yardages, and these kids can accomplish that from different ages. We have close to high 30s number-wise kids, active kids on a team. This is only a variety of them right now, and this is about the equipment that we shoot. It's a little bit fancier than some people probably realize, but these kids, their technical skills are just out of this world. And some stats from this year. Being the banker in me, I like to run numbers also. And I do apologize, I'm getting blind as I get older than 40. But 2020 results, we had 13 individual championships, 6 team championships. I had to divide the team up into 2 divisions for senior and junior division. I'm proud to say that my senior team won the championship every single time this year. And we shoot in numerous organizations. We shoot in state level, IBO, state level ASA, West Virginia, S3DA, which is all made up of youth shooting. And then we shoot on the national level where the kids are competing against everybody across the states, and then when we get to the worlds, also we have everybody from the world side. But to put into perspective, my team of kids scored first place 48 times this year, with an average of 18.4% of time. They've scored second place 39 times, which equates to about 15%. Third place was 29 times at 11%. Fourth place, 37 times for 14.2% times, or percentage. Fifth place has scored 21 times for 8%. 6 through 10, they had 55 times for 21%. On a given day, 87.7% of the time, they were in the top 10. Outside of top 10, about 12.3. 44.6 times, they were in the top 3 of their competition-wise. 66.9 in top 5. That is out of 260 registered shooting events for the kids. We were developed, so to speak, within Preston County. That's where their roots are. But we have kids from Mon County that are here with us tonight. We have kids that are shooting for us from Marion County and Greene County, PA. So we touch a lot of youth in different areas, but more so, as I mentioned before, these kids are phenomenal athletically and academically. And not only do we strive for perfection in the archery world, because the archery side brings a lot of value that we can project into the workforce of doing things right the first time. In my opinion, that seems to be lacking nowadays. People just want to just take the easy way and not get things done properly. But archery provides these kids with a way to do things right the first time. How to work together as a team. How to work individually for composure, patience, understanding of how to do stuff. And 99.9% of the time, these kids are doing all this by judging the distance. So they're doing anywhere from 0 to up to almost 50 yards. And they're within reason, they're within a yard or two max off. That is precision. That is just something that nobody else can do within reason. We go to tournaments from Pennsylvania, clear down to Kentucky, North Carolina, Ohio, we're all over. And I look at these young youth that are going to be the next leader of Preston County, Mon County, wherever we are, and I'm super proud of them. So I'd like to recognize them, going from youngest to oldest, within reason. Sawyer Schnapp, come here, bud. Sawyer's in Brewston. He's in first grade. Not good at that. Fisher Schnapp, third grade. Henry Harsh is fourth grade. Okay, we're getting there. Archer Tishner, fifth. Okay, I was there. Let's go. Paisley Schnapp is 6th grade at Brewston. And so far, these are all Brewston kids. Rosie Malone is going to be 6th grade at Morgantown. Archer Tishner is Ashton. Sorry, I'm still bad with names still. Ashton Tishner is in 8th grade at Brewston. Let's see who's next. Okay, so we have Adam Gillespie is in 8th grade at Brewston. Easton Schnapp, 8th grade in Brewston. And I forgot to announce, Ashton Tishner is a state champion this year for West Virginia. Easton Schnapp is a multi-time state champion for West Virginia. All right, let's go to the next age group. Raina Schnapp, Morgantown, or UHS, 10th grade? Yeah. 10th grade, okay. Ooh, this is getting hard.
We're all the same age.
Well, okay. Gavin Garlitz is a junior at Preston High School. He's also on the wrestling team, golf team, and he's on a bike racing team where he's a national champion. two-time national champion. The kid's phenomenal. We can probably play chess and win. Jesse DeSantis, Jr. at Preston, right?
Yeah.
Okay. He was second place in the state this year. Chase, you're in the same grade? Okay, Chase Beatley, he's actually new to our team at Preston High School as well. Carson Stone, he's junior as well at Preston High School, he's on the FFA. He's our livestock kind of guy. Avery, are you 11th? 12th, 11th grade. Okay, Avery Malone, she just started shooting this year, and she shot lights out at the IBO Worlds for her first time, and she's done absolutely phenomenal. Oh, Paisley has to get it going. She has a volleyball game right now, so thank you, Paisley. Yes, good luck, Paisley. Mackenzie Bankhead is a senior at Preston High School. She is a West Virginia State champion this year. Grant Schnapp is a senior at UHS, and he is a state champion this year as well. Also, we're missing a lot of kids. A lot of kids are playing soccer right now for Preston High School and different athletic stuff going on. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to present the Anchor Point team of 2022. These kids have done phenomenal things, like I said before, and I'm very proud of them, and I hope you all will be proud of them as well. So, thank you. Any questions if I can answer for anybody?
When can we sign our kids up?
I have kids from 5 years old up to 18 years old.
Okay.
So we don't take push anybody away. We try to have these kids lead, and that's another thing. The senior class is part of the leadership team and mentors for the kids for the lower age level. So we're teaching these older kids how to be leaders and mentors to the younger group, and they help me coach them from that different perspective too. So we have all kinds of various stuff going on.
Where was this idea born out of?
The idea absolutely came out of nowhere. So when the pandemic happened back in 2020, late 2020, I took my son Easton to his first indoor shoot, January 23rd of 2021, and he absolutely loved it. I came home and Mackenzie Bankhead, my neighbor girl here, she was up at the house and she said, "I'd love to learn how to shoot." She's left-handed. I had a left-handed bow. We hurried up and reconfigured it, and she started shooting. She fell in love with it. So we went from 1 kid to 2 kids, and then my nephew Grant and a couple of his buddies got into it as well, and then we went from 1 kid essentially to high 30s out of nowhere. So it's been a blessing in disguise. These kids keep me youthful. Some of them chase me with snakes. Some of them torment me with different stuff, and I'm learning the different language of being a teenager again. And I have to constantly ask them what does certain abbreviations mean. So,
Where do you practice?
we practice indoor at Cheat Lake. We have a practice range for what we call 3D competitions, 3D targets. And that's in Preston here. And then we have different outdoor yardages that I configured at my house that the kids can shoot up to 70, 80 yards if they need to. 80, okay, sorry. So we practice all over though. So we're a one-man band, but we do it all. Any other questions?
What's it cost the kid to participate?
I don't charge anything for the kids to participate. I believe in fostering an atmosphere where I want the kids to be able to come in and not have a burden for financial reasons. The only thing that parents have to pay for right now is entry fees and obviously equipment. I do fundraising every year to pay for jerseys for the kids, and my goal is to pay for obviously more stuff for the kids, but eventually be able to pay for entry fees for the youth. That way it's never a financial burden for the parents and anybody as a whole. So I see so much of what archery has done for me in life, from a personal standpoint and professional standpoint from my career now. And I want to be able to help these kids have that same opportunity regardless of what background they come from. So some of these kids, as I mentioned before, have backgrounds within the athletic side where they're always playing different sports. Some of them have never done this before. Some of them have different abilities of learning abilities. A prime example, Young lady on my team, her first shoot, she had a lot of anxiety, and she was about as red in the face as you could ever imagine. Just very nervous, very scared. And through this whole process, she was able to come and lower her anxiety levels where she can interact with different people. She interacts with adults so much better now when she goes to these shoots. And it doesn't necessarily help with skill set, but it helps with so many other different things in life as well. So it's just a wonderful sport for these kids to be involved in.
Can you replicate a satellite in the southern part of town?
I can't see why we couldn't. All it takes is dedication and someone that loves being around kids and archery. But yeah, that's my goal, is to keep this moving for our territory right now, and if we can, move it on to other areas as well. So it's I can't speak on behalf of these kids, but it's been wonders for me to be around these youth. They're phenomenal.
Thank you. No, that's the
Thank you.
Mrs. Plum, do you need a picture for him?
I think Mr. Schnapp, didn't you give them a picture that's on the Brad? Isn't there a picture attached to the agenda? There is.
There was probably some shots from
Yes.
Facebook.
Yeah.
You
You know,
might get something tonight.
If those would have more of the kids in them, I'll use those, since everybody.
I don't have an updated picture as of yet for this year. We've had many rainouts where we had pictures and schedule conflicts, but we can grab one now if you'd like.
Okay, we can do that.
Can the board members like to be involved?
No.
No, we'll shake hands with him. I don't want to chase the southern.
All right, talk to the front, back.
Oh, it gets in the front.
Okay, two short kids up front. Okay. Easton, Adam, right here. Make 3 reps. Jump it.
Wait, I'm gonna do it.
As long as.
Coach, you need to be at. We should have grabbed the keys and we wishes. Thank you.
Thank you for everyone for your time.
You're risking it, buddy.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. The 2 tall kids are skyscraping me. It's embarrassing when I. The younger one. And one's a skyscraper. Appreciate it.
And those that are on the arch, if you guys want to leave, you can go ahead and we'll give you a second. If you want to stay, that's also okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next under delegations, we have 2. However, at this time, I'd like to turn it over, I'm looking at you, Mr. Knotts, to Mr. Knotts.
Well, we'll start with, we have a recognition that we'd like to thank. You guys, when we were going around the building, saw that pretty much the entire 4th, 5th grade hallway, 2nd and 3rd grade hallway has a brand new coat of paint. The materials came from the levy, but the workmanship and the sweat and all the work came from some volunteers, and we want to recognize them tonight because they really did give just a lot of time and a lot of effort. Brian Sell from Sell Enterprises was here for 5 days during the day and also during the evening. We had Brandon Perry and J.R. Ford and some other people from Perry Electric were here through the evening, and they banged out 2 whole hallways, 2 coats of paint, and a stripe in 5 days. I mean, that was an insane amount of work in a short amount of time. And we also wanted to thank Abby Perry, too, for putting and painting a brand new mural that's in the ramp hallway between the 4th, 5th hallway, pre-K hallway, and down to the 2nd, 3rd hallway. So if you guys want to come up, we'd like to thank you all for your time, your energy, your efforts, because it has not gone unnoticed. And we got a plaque for you guys that we're going to put up in the hallway just so everybody can remember and know where all that work came from. So we just wanted to thank you guys. It was above and beyond the help that you've given us here in the school, and we just wanted to make sure that the Board of Ed and everybody here that's here tonight knows that the time and energy that you guys put into this. You need a picture?
Yeah, why don't you just swing around in front like you did, like the archery team did.
Okay.
Do you have, are these,
Do you want these
folks
people?
with you as well, or?
Alicia, you guys want to jump?
okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
They were also here on the beautification day on one of the hottest days of the summer, shoveling rock. After
And then I was here and helped make all the apple butter.
I appreciate you.
We'll get this put up, and appreciate it doesn't leave your mark on the building. Thank you. Thank you all.
While they run off, just say thank you. You are appreciated.
Yep, thanks, guys.
And I feel old. Because of that one.
Yeah, but you was just
I was a
beginner.
young pup. That's true. I was a young pup.
See you guys.
Thank you. So again, we do want to say thank you though, because it is huge involvement in the communities there. And Mr. Noss, I'm going to start in here real quick, then we'll keep going. Walking through the school, the beautification that's been done, it sure did make a difference. And I'll say thank you for the tour. I know you'll be back, but just so I don't forget to do that.
Okay.
Okay, that's, anybody on delegations will sign in?
She said we have some activities.
Right.
Mr. Strong.
So just, so they'll go off here, okay, they'll go off here first. Okay, first will be, Mrs. Durr, Elizabeth Durr, Child Nutrition Coordinator. I apologize, had to ask Mr. Martin how to pronounce your
Pardon?
name. I said, I apologize, because I can't remember how to pronounce your
Oh,
name.
well, I know, it doesn't look like the way it's spelled. But just
I'll
run it all
remember
together,
next time.
just run it all together, you had it correctly. As the child nutrition coordinator, I oversee 5 federally funded programs. Our summer school, summer food service program, fresh fruit and vegetable program, national school lunch, school breakfast, and after-school snack. So, start off with our 2022 summer food service program. In June, first of all, we operated in 6 sites. We offered breakfast and lunch. In June, we served 3,003 meals. July, 6,334 meals for a total of 9,337 meals during our 6-week summer program, which I think is pretty awesome. Our fresh fruit and vegetable program just found out that 2 of our schools have been selected for 22-23 to receive funding for this program. And Kingwood Elementary will be receiving $18,100. Fellows,ville Elementary will be receiving $4,600. And this will allow us to buy fresh fruit and vegetable for those students, and it's outside or in addition to our breakfast and lunch program. So we'll be able to offer it as a snack, try to get them to learn more about what healthy eating is, fruits, vegetables, incorporate that with our wellness program. So pretty excited about that. But in order to be selected, or in order to have a chance to be selected, you have to be an elementary school, represent the highest percentage of students, and certified for free and reduced meals. We also have to participate in the National School Lunch Program, and then once we got our award, I had to fill out a little brief application. The other 3 programs I oversee are school lunch program, school breakfast, and after-school snacks. Excited that once again, Preston County Schools qualifies for the CEP program, which stands for Community Eligibility Provision. In a nutshell, it means that because of our socioeconomic status, we are able to offer breakfast and lunch to all students free of charge. Also excited that we're really trying to beef up our participation in mostly the school lunch program. We're offering more, I guess you would say, homemade or less heat 'em up type meals. Some of the things we have on the menu now are chicken Alfredo. We have a sidewinder potato, so it's a sidewinder kind of French fry-ish type potato with a barbecue pork on top with a barbecue and cheese sauce. That was a big hit. That was a new item this year. We've also added a buffalo and a barbecue dip with the tortilla chips that are the whole grain. That was a pretty big hit. Chicken drumstick with a waffle, taco salad, chili mac and cheese, Salisbury steak and mashed potatoes, a popcorn chicken bowl. So it has the mashed potatoes and gravy, kind of like one of the fast food restaurants, what I won't mention, but anyway, the mashed potatoes with the gravy, some corn, the popcorn chicken and cheese on top. Really trying to get some interest in getting kids to be eating some things other than just the everyday, heat 'em up type things. Tandoori chicken, fried rice, that's another big hit. Also excited to announce that through our federal government, we received what's called a supply chain assistance grant, tune of a little over $98,000. That is used exclusively to purchase domestic foods that are unprocessed or minimally processed. We're basically going to, one of the things that is allowed under that are ability to purchase juices and milk. So we're pretty well covering, or trying to cover most of those costs with our milk vendor, because that's an easy accounting if we would try to do it through some of our other purchases. October is Farm to School Month. On October 27th, we will be offering sausage gravy over biscuits. We will be purchasing our sausage from our PHS Animal Processing. So that's a win-win for everybody. Proud to announce also that we have refrigeration monitoring systems on at 9 of the 10 schools that have the large walk-in freezer refrigeration units. Friday, I got an alert on my phone, it always was on Friday or Saturday or Sunday, but anyway, Friday evening, got an alert. One of our schools was having a cooler issue. I drug my husband to the school, called out one of the maintenance men. So excited that the maintenance gentleman joined us. We were able to get it up and running, and we lost only a very small amount of product because of that. So that's a win. I'm going to end and kind of dovetail on the fact that we had the maintenance gentleman, I'm not sure, but I think he lives in the Terrata area, so he had to travel a distance. I traveled a distance to get there, as well as all of our service personnel. And I don't know if you're aware that Governor Justice proclaimed on September 23rd that it was West Virginia Service Personnel Day. And just to kind of read a little bit of that is, whereas service personnel are involved in nearly every aspect of education by maintaining buildings and grounds, preparing and serving meals, keeping school facilities clean and orderly, and assisting in the classroom, as well as providing administrative support functions, safe transportation, and many other specialized services. And then it goes on that whereas it is fitting that we recognize the outstanding work of these individuals. And, these are some of our unsung heroes in public schools and in our educational, we talk about the teachers and we talk about administration, but these are the unsung heroes. They don't get the recognition and thanks that they deserve. Any questions?
Thank you, Ben.
You said that Fellows,ville and Kingwood were the two that qualified for the fresh fruit and vegetable thing. Then you listed a list of requirements. What was it that our other schools mainly did not qualify for that group?
I just know that the State Department sent me and said, these are the two that have been selected. I have nothing in it. It's above my pay grade. I just know that.
And this is Durham historically, just thinking back to when I was an administrator, I believe it was almost exclusively we would get two schools.
Right,
When
and I don't
I
know,
was
it
at
might-
Fellows,ville, we had that grade as well.
Last year it was Terrata and Fellows,ville. This year it's Kingwood and Fellows,ville. I think it has to do with their percentage of free and reduced.
That's what I figured, TK Kingwood got.
But why more didn't get it, I don't know. I'm sure that they also have an amount of money. They want to spread it evenly among the other counties. But they came to me and said, are you willing to take this on? Absolutely. So I didn't question.
No, I just was curious.
I didn't say, gee. I didn't question any other.
Does the current lunch program, like, during the Obama administration, there was a change in the way school lunches was done, and we started limiting, like, packs of ketchup to children and amount of ranch you use. Are we still under restrictions of that nature?
Yes, we are. We have very strict guidelines that we have to follow as far as sodium, overall calorie content. We try to adhere to those federal guidelines, but at the same time, if they take 3 packs of ketchup instead of 2 or whatever, we're not gonna.
So we're not policing it as much as it was when it was first introduced, per se? Potentially, that's fine.
I don't know who's the monitor.
That's fine, that's fine. I understand.
We follow federal guidelines.
We try to follow the federal
Right.
guidelines to the best of our
The best of our
ability.
abilities. Okay.
That's
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on record.
No, I just.
Hoping things had improved since then.
Just prefer this, those are the regulations. We try to do our best to adhere to it.
My last comment, and then I'll take somebody else, I'm sorry I always talk, but I will tell you as a father, my son, who is nothing like his father who eats anything put before him and is much pickier, but he does like to see things to determine if he's going to see it or if he's going to eat them the second time they're packaged. But he is particularly excited to try the Sidewinder and barbecue pork when it comes around next. So the kids enjoy eating, and this has been an item of discussion. So.
And at the high school, we are offering a second option this year where they, in addition to, we're back up and running on the salad bars, those that have equipped with salad bars. Because of COVID, that was a problem. And, but at Preston High School, we're offering a second option kind of box. So in addition to the normal menu, one day it might be the pepperoni roll and whatever else that's in there. Another day it might be ham and cheese sandwich. One day it could be a yogurt and granola. So trying to give them a second option, and our participation at the high school has increased. So I think all in all, things going well.
the last thing I will say, I'm sorry, I said it was gonna be the last thing, but thank you. I will tell you, when I was in Terre Haute, East Preston, my favorite people are still the retired cooks, my custodians, and my bus driver, Bill LaRue. I had a lot of wonderful teachers, but the service personnel were very influential in my time in school, and
Well-
those were the people that made it.
And I will say, as a teacher, my first day in public schools, I was told, make friends with the secretary, the cook, and the custodian. They're the people that run the school, and they're the people that are gonna help you the most. And I would like you to carry that out. So, but anyway,
Thank you.
any other
Anybody else?
questions?
I'll follow up with a thank you. We do appreciate the fact that the number that you said is impressive, especially for summer. So it ensures our kids are getting fed over the summertime. That's what's important about that number.
Right.
And thank you and everybody that's involved in doing it. We appreciate you.
So welcome.
Ms. Warriors and Mr. Sines. I think I have, is that right? That's all I did, yeah. And I've got glasses on, I still can't see, so.
I guess I'll go first while Paul switches out computers here. I provided you this evening, I'm gonna talk a little bit about communication first while we switch things over. In January of, must be I did a report today, but I can't see without it, so. January the 21st of 2022, we had 1,230 Android apps downloaded and 1,780 people downloaded our new app. And then if I move to September the 19th, 2022, last week, we have 2,000 people that have downloaded our app for the Android device and 2,050 for the Apple device. So we're looking at over 4,000 people have downloaded our app. So that's a little statistics there. Some Facebook statistics. We have 8,766 followers on Facebook. 21.5% are men, 78.5% are women, and we have had 57 new followers just in the last 28 days. And the range of people, it's broken down to age groups, but we average between 25 and 65 is our average of ranges. I've got it broken down more if you'd like to see that, but we have that. The other thing, when we talk Facebook, I'm just gonna shoot some numbers out. As you see, we do have a huge following on our Facebook. But for example, when I announced the Preston County Schools open house dates and times, that blurb, we had 6,871 people look at that. When I announced the bus schedules, we had 5,833 people look at that. When I posted that we had free breakfast and lunch meals, 6,969 people saw that. When we posted the online information form, 6,210. When I posted that we were going to be off for Labor Day and then through another online information sheet, 6,578 people saw that. The post that I made last night that reminded everybody about the Buckwheat Festival week and 2 hour early out in that was up just one day, and we already have 4,715 people that saw that. But the number one spot for the year, of course this won't be a surprise, but that goes to Brad Martin, because whenever the superintendent speaks, people like to listen. So Brad had, his post was 8,526 people. So whenever the superintendent speaks, people like to listen. So we do have a huge following.
I watched it twice.
So we do have a large following with our Facebook. And then the other thing I'm going to show you is with ThrillShare, and you don't have that. I can bring that up.
Do you want us to move back to the place?
Yeah, you probably, the next part of the presentation, you probably just.
We reserved the table back
Yeah,
there.
so if you'll come back here to this table we have set up.
Ms. Morales?
Yeah. of our website where we manage our district. And just, there's a counter. Paul and I decided it would be nice to look at the data that we have from year to year. So we had them to wipe out our counters as of August the 9th. So when I go to, for example, our folders, so if I look at parents and students, and I go to calendar and enrollment, then you can see the documents that we have out on our website. You can see that 1,978 people actually hit the calendar from the website, and then 47 people looked at when report cards were going to be issued and those types of things. So I can actually look at each document that's put up on the website, and that will show me how many times people have actually hit that and looked at that document. So that's sort of on the back end of what we look at in ThrillShare. And then the other thing that we could look at is whenever we make our calls and everything out with the alerts. And then there's an analytics section that tells me exactly, how many calls went out, if they were successful and they were failed. So we have analytical data on everything that we send out in the back end of our ThrillShare site. So I think that was all in it. Oh, one more thing while I'm talking. So let me go to.
Mrs. Moyers, I know one question that Mr. Kisner has had is, we have used the call feature very sparingly.
Yes.
While giving the schools an opportunity to kind of get a lot of the numbers updated within the system.
Yeah.
We found if we don't allow for some of that update time, we'll get a large number of calls that are saying that they're being contacted by Preston County Schools and they don't have any children in school because it's an issue with numbers haven't been updated. So
Yeah,
I know
we're
the
very
schools
close.
have been actively working to try to get those numbers updated as quickly as possible in the system.
Yes, we're very close. And probably what we'll do, I'm going to direct some of the schools to start making a phone call, and then it's going to say, we made a phone, like we'll put it out on Facebook that says, hey, we're sending a phone call out at 4 o'clock tonight. Your phone should ding, your text message, your landline should, so we're try to communicate that if it didn't ring, then we need to call the school to see. Maybe we've got, when we typed all that information in, we've reversed 2s and 5s. So we're very close to having the phones start ringing. And then the other thing, well, it's just a text message now, so you can read that at your leisure. The other thing I'm just going to hit on, the last couple times when we had sessions, we didn't have a place where you guys could get in and see what actual GSA, what it looks like from the kid's standpoint. So if I go to practice tests, I'll just show you, and you can do this, any parent can do this, anybody can do this. I'm just going to leave everything toggled off, and I'll select a 4th grade sample here for tonight. And it has an ELA and math practice, and we are when we come back Tuesday after buckwheat, we will start our writing assessment. We will do that 3 times. We'll do a pre and a post writing assessment, and then our final 4th one will be the actual GSA. So we are going to do that, so the students will get on and they will take a practice writing assessment. We'll look at the data, we'll know where pluses, minuses, and all that, and then we do a reteach, and then we'll have a second pre and post test, and there's different things that we look for each time. So that's one thing that's going to be hit. You're not going to see a writing sample. I apologize for that tonight, but this is just, I'll just give you a couple sample questions here. So that's just a sample 4th grade. Basically, the students would read the question, check the answer, and then they just hit the next button at the top of the screen. And a lot of times what we want the kids to do, it's not so much, the teachers are teaching the content and the standards. What we find when we look at these types of questions, it's how it's asked on the state assessment. It's not that, I'm going to say, it's not that our students don't know how to do this. It's just, it's the wording. It all comes back to how it's worded and how the problem is presented, or how it's laid out, or how it's written on a computerized test. So that's why it's so important for the students to go through these practice items. And a lot of them are in the RCD units now that we've developed. A lot of them are used for eye openers, morning work, those types of things. So the kids will see 1 to 2, 3 types of questions throughout the entire school year. in preparation for the state test. So that's the those are the kinds of things that you would see there with the GSA, and you're more than welcome to just go on. All I did was, if you just go to the platforms, and it's the West Virginia testing platform, and when you come up, you go clear to the bottom for practice tests, and any of you board members can go on and look at the types of questions that they offer for all the grade levels 3 through 8. So that's it.
It's a little representation of the test they take, like time-wise, question number-wise, the whole thing, or just a couple
No,
samples?
this is just the test that I brought up, I think had 12 or 15
Right.
questions, so you'll see a sampling,
It's
yes.
a very miniature subset.
Yeah, mm-hmm.
Could you just email us that to the site?
It's right on our website.
Okay.
It's just right on our website. It's called, West Virginia Testing Portal, the testing platform. Right there it is at the very bottom. And then it's just right there, practice tests. Okay. And I think that's all I have, and then Paul's gonna talk about the rest of it here.
All right, as she was talking about with the calls and stuff like that, the new WELIS 2.0, there is gonna be a feature on it. I'm not sure when they're gonna open it up. I know we have access where we can assign parents and stuff, where they access their student accounts, where they can actually update their information themselves. Like I said, that's one of the things that's gonna be done by county. If the county says, okay, we're gonna open it up and let our parents go in and update their contact information, that's gonna save a lot of the issues on getting student information forms and stuff in, letting the secretaries get them updated. Because sometimes the secretaries, like you saw right there when Jonas was talking, the secretaries are playing nurses right now and they don't have time to actually get their work done. So that might be a feature that's gonna help them out, but like I said, there's still work on that new WELIS 2.0. We're still fighting issues and stuff.
I think, I felt like that's kind of a little bit on the back burner, what they're trying to deal with so many of the other issues right now, but I do think that's gonna be a feature that's gonna be really helpful to a lot of schools, to again, kind of expedite that process, of getting those updates made.
All right, I'm just gonna talk real quick, there you have left in your package right there, just the number of technology work orders that we did last year and how many we've done so far this year. There's 4 guys in the technology department that's under me, so I mean, we cover a lot of work orders. We try to get to them very quickly, so obviously we noticed right here, over half the work orders are done on a 1-day basis with it. And that's a lot because we have remote access into the systems, and we can just remote in, take care of the issue, be done with it. So there's a breakdown right there on schools and stuff right there, how many spent on. And you see it's pretty comparative across the schools. The larger schools have more work orders, the smaller schools have less work orders on, but that's consistent with it. But one of the things I want to demonstrate to you today is sometimes we get a lot of calls on, hey, my student is being on the wrong sites and stuff like that, not paying attention to things. It's technically not a technology issue, it's more of a classroom management issue. But we decided this year, I decided to provide them a tool where they actually can monitor what the students are doing with that and actually can filter the students themselves. Because the way the filtering works is the state provides us with a filtering system. They filter what they bare minimum they have to filter on that. Then us as a county, we can filter more categories on top of what the state does. And what the student part we put on there is allowing the teachers to filter even more than what we're filtering. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna show you some of these features with that, talking to you guys have your laptops back. And I know I talked to Mrs. Feathers on the phone about some of this right here, she had some questions, I said, well, it's funny that you mentioned some stuff.
Hey, Paul, should they minimize their board doc session to jump into a new,
Nope.
Okay.
See it right where they're at.
alrighty.
Alright, so what's going on right here, first off, I just wanna show you some of the filtering that we have control over. So like if I go underneath their policies right here, and I go underneath our default policy, this is what the students have. You can see on here, I can filter by websites over here, I can add websites in. I can also do by categories, because all your websites have categories with them. And you notice I have them locked down pretty good with it. Aggressive behaviors all blocked down, controlled substances is locked down. Entertainment is open and blocked down on the same thing, just depends on the categories. Games I have blocked down except for educational games, because if I block all games, then some of the teachers say, hey, I need this admin help and stuff like that, so I open up the education games. But you can block it by categories. You also can go on YouTube. Notice on YouTube they have age restrictions, sidebars are blocked, comments are blocked, live chats blocked. I can open up certain videos if they're not cleared by the state, because the way the state does right here, there are some videos that are age restricted and the state blocks them automatically. The only way they can be opened up is if I clear them on the back end, 2 different places. That And our teachers, on the other hand, they can access a lot more stuff than what the students do, just because I don't have this quite as restrictive on that. And that allows them to preview a lot of stuff or show it on the presentation, stuff like that. They can show it to the whole class, but not actually one student. But the feature we're going to look at today is called Go Guardian Teacher. Our Go Guardian Teacher, I still control a lot of things in the back on this right here. So I'm allowing classroom sessions on there, display the session information to the student so the student can tell if they're being monitored or not. Because there's some things that not, I don't think it's really ethical to monitor a student's device unless they know that you're actually being monitored. Now, there are some situations that's different, but that's for admin's rates and not teacher rates. The teacher daily summary right there, where they'll get an email saying what they have on their sessions and stuff on it. If you noticed, I have it blocked off where teachers cannot make calls to students. That's just because it's going to open up a whole other can of worms if it happens with it. Likewise, no group calls. So that means no webcams and stuff like that can be turned on by a teacher. They do give you a feature where you can do lecture and presentations, which I don't think it's beneficial right now. When we were remote, it's been a nice feature where a teacher can say, all right, I'm having a lecture, everybody's screen's going to have my lecture on it, and they can't go anywhere else. But since we're in a classroom setting, I don't think that's necessarily turned on, so that's why it's turned on. And then on scheduling wise, you can set in here what your schedule is. Most time you notice right there, I have from 7:30 to 3:30, except for Monday, I had to change it for tonight, because if I have a 7:30 to 3:30, we can't do a demonstration tonight. So that's why it's changed there, but I'll change it right back to presentation. Saturdays and Sundays, they cannot do any presentation.
And Paul, like we discussed today, the only one who can control that particular feature is a master user like Paul. So like a typical teacher user is unable to make change those
They
parameters,
cannot.
correct?
There's only 3 admin users on this that has super admin rights. I have it, Darla has it, and Brad has it. That's the only ones who can make changes on this settings.
Which is a good safeguard because again, we don't want that to be open access for all users.
So if you're actually a teacher in here, this right here is what the teacher sees on here. They can add their classroom in. I can go into my classroom. I can see what my students are. You can add students in, or you can give them a code. It's really easy for them to do it. They just go to add students. They can say, all right, I want to use a code. Tell all your students go to that website, enter that code, and actually enroll them in the class. What it does when you do that, it puts them underneath pending enrollment. So they don't automatically, hey, I'm going to put this in or give it to my friends. We're just going to bombard that class. A teacher still has to approve them to go into that class. Or you can add them by the student email address, and the teachers have the student email addresses by WeWis 2.0, and they know what's on the class roster with the students' addresses are. So if you notice in our class, we have set up right here, I have the 5 board members plus Mr. Martin's in there, so that's in my class. When you do those classes on that, we can go up here on the sessions, we can start a new session, or you can put it on the calendar so it rolls on a daily basis. So if you have a class, I have this class from 8 o'clock to 8:35 every day, I want this to be monitored every day on that. You can put it on the calendar, and every day it automatically sets, the teacher doesn't have to do anything. But if you want to just do an impromptu session on that, you can come over here, all right, my class will be 45 minutes long. I can apply a scene to, and this is something that we have to work with the teachers more, because right now, teachers are just monitoring the devices and not actually applying scenes. What a scene is just your list of, all right, this is my allowed sites, I only want the students to be able to go to these sites. Or the students can go everywhere except for, I don't want them going to these sites, a block list. And that's what's set up on scenes, is you have allowed list and block list. So if I go to the allowed list on this right here, I just created some sites. We can go to the county webpage, we can go to ESPN, we can go to Board Docs. We can go to Clever, we can go to Microsoft Online, check our email, we have CNN, WD Metrics. Like I said, these are just ones I threw together. What we're gonna do is you also can do quick lists. And these are ones that Go Guardian shows up on here. But as myself and as Darla, we're gonna start creating ones for the district, so we can say, if you only wanted access to Schoology, we're gonna give you the sites for that. So a teacher doesn't have to sit there and type in the addresses they want. They can just go here and select the schools. And that has all the sites built into them that you need. So we're gonna go back to our classroom. We're gonna start our class. And we're actually just gonna do a block list. On that block list, I'm just blocking ESPN and I'm blocking YouTube. So we're gonna start the session. Inside this session, you'll notice that it shows all the students that's in the class. And see right off the bat, Cross has 2 block sites up on this machine.
That's not unusual.
So what happens on this right here, it shows your students right here, and you notice like Brad has 2 windows opened up. It's because he has both Chrome and Edge opened up, or 2 versions of the ones opened up. Cross is the same way on that. It has Bruce up there. Jeff isn't online because it says he's offline. You have Lucas and you have Pam up here. So I'm actually just monitoring your screens. And this right now is what most of our teachers are doing without the scene in it. And let's say we bring one of Brad's machines up.
It's got blocked.
But you didn't give me the right site with it.
I went to ESPN.
All right, so he went to ESPN. It's blocked right there. And it even says right there on that message, hey there, you're on a site that the teacher doesn't want you to go to. And you notice on the left, it shows you what tabs he has opened up. And it told me, okay, he's trying to go to ESPN, and that's why it's blocked. ESPN is blocked. YouTube, it's blocked. Preston County Schools, it actually isn't blocked. All right, now he's going to Yahoo. It's not blocked. Now, as a teacher, if I'm watching this right here, and this, like I said, be a lot of times when you're taking tests or things like that, if I see Brad on that site, I'm like, Brad, you probably shouldn't be on that site. So I can close that site.
Just jump to Amazon. Shut down.
Now, as a teacher, if you're going through an entire class right there, you notice, wait a second, there's a lot of students not on task on that. They actually can lock the device. And you actually can put a message that's going to show up on their machine. So I can go back on task. And I'm locking the screen. So what happens is, now Brad actually looks on his things, he actually has, his screen is actually locked. And he can't go anywhere.
I'm looking there, that's what it says to do.
Alright, and then I can actually unlock his device again.
There you go.
And now he can go back where he wants to. You also can open up a new tab, so you say, wait a second, he's getting off task on that. I can open up a tab, and I can say, alright, I want you to go to CNN.com. And when I hit open tab on it, it's going to open up a new tab and goes to CNN. So on the screen, it goes to CNN. A teacher can also communicate, so if a student is really getting off task, I can turn on a chat feature with them. And I can send him a message. And what that does is sends him a message on there, and it pops up that he has a messenger. And you can see what my message is. Now he can respond back to you. So what he does is he responds back so we can have communication back and forth. He cannot close that chat feature. That chat feature is on there until the teacher itself closes that chat feature. So I'm going to close that chat feature.
I can minimize it.
You can minimize it, but you can't close it. Alright, so I just closed it off from that. So this works that way right there. I can go back here. I can also see what apps he has opened up on his computer. On his computer right there, I see he has some search engines, some widgets. So a lot of times kids like playing games in the background, and they don't think the teacher knows because they're really quick about switching screens real quick on that. You actually look at the apps and close down the apps. Now, one feature we put on there, we said we want to know if a student was being monitored or not, how they can tell. What happens is, if you actually look on your student devices in front of you, if you go up to the plugins,
Put the little puzzle piece, guys, right
Yeah,
beside your
click on it.
favorites extension.
The extension.
Yeah.
yeah, the extension. You look at that extension, you see there's 2 Go Guardian extensions. If it is blue, that means you're being monitored. If you click on it, it'll tell you who's monitored. So if you click on it, Brad did that, Brad, go ahead and click on the extension itself.
Click on Go Guardian.
Yeah, because it's blue right now. It'll tell you, okay, hey, you're being monitored.
By
That's
you.
a class. It's a testing classroom. Who the teacher is and why you're being monitored. As soon as we end this session, that goes away. So then you know, hey, I'm not being monitored. And now that was a question, I know Mrs. Feathers, you asked about that, how can you tell? Or if you're like, wait a second, why is this site being blocked and stuff like that? If you're in multiple sessions, it'll actually list both sessions right there. Cause say a teacher, you had a 2 hour early out, and the teacher forgot to change your schedule. Then you can say, all right, then all I have to do is contact the teacher, hey, change your schedule. So it is showing you the features with that. You can do this for the entire class on that, like you see a page is being blocked consistently on that, it'll actually pop up. You actually can unblock this for the entire class. So if they forgot to put something in the list, they actually can just go in real quick and one click unblock. Like I said, teachers should be using scenes, not just sitting here monitoring. If they have the scene set up, it does it automatically for them. Now, what happens after a teacher is done with their class? So we're done with this right here, we're gonna do a session. They get a report emailed to them, not get a report emailed to me, but what they can do on this, now they can go back through and look at their sessions. Anything that you had chatted is recorded. So I can look at this chat log right here, it's like, I recorded 2 messages with Brad. I can sit there and I can view what the messages were. It's recorded on. Likewise, if you went through and closed people's tabs and stuff like that, it shows you everything you did. I closed a tab on Brad. I locked Brad's device. I unlocked Brad's device. It shows you that. It also shows you the timeline, so you can see right here, Brad. If I click on that timeline right there, I can see, he's going right there in that GoGuardian chat, and that's the extension for the chat. And you can see the timelines on here. You also can go underneath the student reports, and I can say, all right, I'm just curious what this student did during that day. So I can go to Brad Martin, I'm just looking at his today right here, and I can view his history. Only when I'm on his session. So anything he did outside of that session does not show up on this report, only when you're recording.
But Paul, if I'm correct in this, like our base, the GoGuardian based filtering system, I mean, if we need to run a detailed report on a student, we have the ability to do as such, but that's not done, I mean, that's done when there's, the teacher expresses concern, parent expresses concern.
Correct.
We don't just up and run those for no reason.
If a parent expresses concern, stuff like that, I can run a full history of
Right.
the student's device on that right there, and like I said, that's only done on if there's issues and stuff like that, concerns. I do not have time to sit there and monitor what every kid does. That's not my intent with this right here, but it is nice the fact that if a parent says, I'm curious what my kid's been on, we can run that report and send it to you.
So you said that if a teacher was watching the student, you wanted the student to be able to know, correct?
Correct.
If I understood that correct. These reports are available to the teacher even if they're not watching live, correct?
Correct.
So a teacher always has access
Only during their session.
during their session.
Right.
During their session, aka during their class period that's set up based on the time restrictions.
Right.
So the teacher technically is watching 100% of the time, they're just not necessarily actively watching.
Correct.
Okay.
And it's one of the things, like you say, well, why is this kid not doing the work and stuff down? They can go back and they can look during their class time and see what the kid's doing. And like I said, if they use the scenes, then it's understandable, all right, this right here, I know you should be focused just on this, because this side I opened up. But like I said, right now our teachers aren't quite there yet, because this program we got started really late at the start of the school year, and it's just like, let's see what happens with this, and now we have to start working on some more staff to go and show the scenes.
But I think our daily usage thus far, I mean, what's our typical usage pattern?
It actually has been pretty high on that, because if you look at our admin rates on this, I can look at the usage, and this shows me that you can see all the teachers and stuff that are starting to use it. And you have the times right there, sessions and stuff on that. Being a super admin, we actually can log in and see exactly what the teachers are doing as well. And that's how I know they're not using scenes, because I can log in as many teachers, they have the session set up, but they don't have, are using scenes, or they're just using it as a management tool right now. Just not quite the way that we need to.
So if the teacher doesn't start a session, the child can still be on the laptop doing anything?
Yep.
But once they start a session, they take control of the of the students, of the students thing. What if 2 teachers have a session going on for the same student, same time?
What happens on that right there, and that's why I said you have to look at that, because that has caused some conflicts.
Yeah.
Because like I had a teacher set up a class for next term, and had students already in there, and that was causing a conflict. She's like, well, I can't get anywhere on this, and it's because she was being monitored 2 different ways. And what it does is it looks at both scenes on that, or what the rules are, and takes, if it's blocked in one, it's blocked in both.
Single common delimiter.
Yep.
It takes the more restrictive one
Yeah.
and wins out, correct?
Right, that's the
Essentially, the
same way-
student ends up under the rules in both classrooms.
Right. And it just combines them together in a way that's restrictive what it does. That's the reason why it's beneficial for a student to see, all right, who's more in class am I actually in? Because if they're in two classes, that is gonna cause conflict.
Yeah.
And then that's where they have to let someone know so that we can talk with the teacher, whatnot, and I can fix it, or they can fix it on their end.
So scene restrictions, this seems to keep a lot of historical data and change data. Let's say that a student set is in a political science class, and they say, my teacher is blocking left wing or right wing, one of the two sides. Do you have the ability to see that history, to be able to
Yes.
see if that complaint is valid? Like, you can see each of those changes that was made to a scene or made to a site restriction in that student's.
Yeah, and it's actually interesting when you look at student things, like you see stuff that's blocked, or you can look and see why was it blocked.
Yeah.
And it tells you, like, we had an issue today with Schoology.com, which is for LMS. It got blocked today about 11:30. And what it is Schoology made a change because they started pointing stuff, because we have to go through Microsoft to log in. They pointed everything to login.windows.net, which is a known spam site. Always has been. Well, Microsoft must have finally bought it, because now it actually redirects back to Microsoft on it, and Schoology is pointing to it, and it's being blocked. I mean, I got calls pretty quick saying, hey, we can't get to Schoology. And Jonas actually is the one that called me on that, and I got on his machine to see what was actually blocked on. I'm like, what's going to be a spam site? And then I
Pretty much
received-
I got my entire middle school freaked out.
Yeah, like, it wasn't a big deal. It was about, 5-10 minutes we had to back up and run on, but that's just because it was a change on Schoology side that no one knew about. And that's where you have to track things down, and it happens. We have to actually block Bing, and I'm not having to unblock Bing, even though Bing's a Microsoft site and some educational stuff like that. We had an issue on it, it was popping up some inappropriate pictures.
There's been situations where it's been able to be compromised, and we just thought that
And
Tom
so
Hagen or
right
other
now,
search engines
Brad
that
has
kids
it
can be
blocked,
available with.
and it's actually interesting because whenever GoGuardian comes up, you actually enter a bypass password, which we have no bypass password set up. But I use that right there, so like, I had a teacher, hey, I need this site opened up, but she didn't know what the URL was. I'm like, well, type your name and that password, and I'll look at it, and I can unblock that site. But it's amazing how many kids try to go to bed, because I see all these password attempts where we're trying to go to. It's actually under all these sites and stuff right there, they enter these passwords in, thinking they can get to these sites with that password, even though there's no password set up, because if you put a password on static, that spreads like wildfire, someone knows. So we have that blocked out. But like I said, we're just trying to help out the teachers, just because we get a lot of things like, we're using the one-to-one devices, for better or worse, but we're trying to help them manage things so you actually can stay on task instead of saying, hey, let's go to this site or that site, and let the kids go willy-nilly on the network, because they're quick on these computers. They know shortcuts and stuff that people have no idea of.
Does GoGuardian provide any kind of proactive, like, a student's been blocked 15 times in a row on this, like, obviously they're trying to get past something. Is there anything that sends out a notification, or?
There is rules and stuff I can set up on it. It's just getting the time to set those rules up, because there actually is a penalty box. If they try to hit a site so many times right there, it'll actually shut their whole network down for however long I set.
Okay.
Those are just rules and stuff where, like I said, this was thrown on us. GoGuardian last year was just thrown on us right about a week before school started, and I had to go back and get all of our devices to put GoGuardian on it. And it was just a bad push up with no training. So I'm just learning things as we go. And that's how we go with it. And I know there's things like we can put rules on it, we can put notifications. So if someone's searching up a lot of stuff on suicide, stuff like that, we can send notifications out to guidance counselors and things like that, or different things on drugs and stuff on it, just as alerts and warnings. But that's something that we're still building on the back end.
And we do have something very similar that works with our K2 iPads. It's called Classroom, and the teachers can actually send, like if they want the kids in iReady, they can send the site there and they can log it, and the kids can't get anywhere else. So we have very similar things working with the exact same way with the iPads.
You know, what she's talking about right there, if you notice this GoGuardian's actually designed, it actually was designed for Chromebooks, and then they've been trying to back end it to Windows. Like I said, it's been some transitions with it, but like I said, it's private, so I stay. But it's on all of our 312 laptops. iPads are filled by GoGuardian, but you can't do GoGuardian Teacher with it, and that's why you use Apple Classroom for the iPads. So like I said, we're trying to help the teachers with some classroom management, because I know it is an issue, and I see it constantly.
Well, and I think too, Paul, as you said, I think that we've had parents that have expressed that their kids have been unfocused, they're jumping all around in different places. So it's really an effort to try to again, get a more controlled environment in terms of what the kid is working on in class.
Like with anything, there are ways around it. Yes, there's always ways around things. You just have to know what you're doing to get around it. A lot of times you're hacked into the systems, doing stuff that you shouldn't be doing anyway. But that's with any system on that, just like Bing being hacked. You think Microsoft has all these security things, but they still get hacked. It happens.
You said that if a child is searching suicide or drugs, that we have the ability to send out something to the guidance counselors. Is that only internal, or we have the ability to notify parents?
The only thing you notify parents, I can only notify if you have a K-12 account on that, but then it should be the responsibility for the guidance counselors to reach out to them.
And to Go Guardian too, I believe those type of searches are also actively flagged within the
They
Go
are
Guardian
flagged.
system as well.
And there's reports and stuff on flagged things, right there, what they think on flags, and we have all the keywords and stuff in the flag them as well. And like I say, it's just something that it's gonna constantly keep changing that because you have a health class, you look on stuff like that, then you look, oh, okay, that's not really an issue on that, they're looking on that. Or like we had nurses, I have a bunch of nurses got flagged for looking up stuff on drugs, which I know they're gonna be looking stuff up on drugs, so it's not something that's a concern. So, like I said, I just want to give you guys just an overview of the filtering process on that, and I know Mrs. Feder asked about that, even though we already had this plan, just what a student actually sees on the device and what they're trying to do. So is there any questions? And is there any questions on the technology department whatsoever? I mean, we're involved in just about every single program there is.
What's your biggest concern?
My biggest concern? My biggest concern is I think teachers are going away from actually teaching. That's my biggest concern. I think they have these one-to-one devices set up to be tools, and I think they're using that as teaching devices instead of as tools for resources. That's my biggest concern. And that's just my preference on that. I'm in technology with it, but I just see that as, and I know the nation's going that way, as, hey, we want everything on devices. We try to keep the notice for the device that Windows 11 on. We try to keep everything as up to date, so when they leave school, or if they're out in the workforce, they know what they're doing. I know a lot of schools want to go to Chromebooks and stuff like that, but how many businesses actually use Chromebooks? Very few.
Right.
So we try to keep them updated as far as technology goes. I know the CTE program tries to use certifications from Microsoft, but that's always a year behind, and that always causes conflicts as well. But yeah, that's my biggest concern is I think we're going away from what actually needs to be done.
No, thank you. That's just good to hear from the guy monitoring the tech.
You guys, I just would like to say, I just wanted to thank Darla and Paul. I've had the honor and the privilege of working with both of them very closely over the last 5 or 6 years at the central office, and I just want to commend both of them. They have tireless work ethics and are just constantly working for the best interests of the kids in Preston County. So we're in very good hands, I think, with these two technologies.
Signs, thank you. Mr. Signs and Ms. Winters again, I'll say thank you. I know Mr. Martin just did. Mr. Signs? Ms. Winters also, happy birthday. Oh, yeah. Just so, I won't do anything stupid.
Oh, no, we
Like
should
say an age or anything of that nature, just because I know you too well and I know you would get even. But seriously, thank you both. I reiterate what Mr. Martin said. I worked a lot, Ms. Weir's, in a different way because we started programs as I was teaching. I had no idea, and I could say help. Mr. Sines started when I got a computer. Please come help. Please come help. Okay, so they are there for all of us, and you are appreciated. So thank you both, and happy birthday, Ms. Williams, on a serious note as well. Moving on, Mr. Rose. And I'm gonna ask, because you signed up, this is both the same thing, right? Both on the agenda and sign up, you're not in there twice, right? Okay.
Yeah, same thing. I just want to give an update since the last time I was at the last board meeting. The 3 students that was caught on my bus vaping, they did get a summons from the magistrate court just the other day. One of my students, he just told me Friday that he had gotten the summons. And now what happens after that, I don't know. But since that last time I was here, that same week that I was here, 2 students in the county was caught with THC vaping on the bus. Last week, 3 was caught vaping on the bus. One boy staggered off the bus. He had a rough time getting off the bus. And one of the girls, I believe she was 16 years old, but I'm not sure on that age. I guess they searched her book bag, and she had quite a bit of this stuff in her bag. And along with some kind of little benzene torch where they heat the spoons up and stuff, she had that stuff on her too. What was done and stuff, I have no idea. But this seems to be a very, very serious problem. If you take your ink pen, put a dot there, fentanyl is in the county. It's here. But that little dot right there is enough to kill someone. I pray for my students every morning I get. I pray for all students in Preston County, especially students on my bus. And I have a very, 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 very good relationship with my kids. I have very good kids. I put my kids up against any bus in this county and probably other counties also. These kids, I'm the first person they see in the school system, and I'm the last person they see in the school system every day. Now, back to this vaping thing, some of my kids on the bus has asthma and stuff. You know, they can't. I know I have a problem when a parent brings a student to the door of my bus if they're smoking. If the heater's on, whatever, the vent's right there, and it just pulls that in and puts it through the whole bus. I don't know about you all, but I get a headache real quick from any kind of smoke or anything. But since the last time we was here, Brad, I think you said you're gonna have a meeting with some officials. Where are we at on that?
Well, Mr. Rhodes, we have this later on the agenda, but just to quickly update, I've had direct communications with our magistrate's office and did get a written reply back that they would entertain, if a ticket infraction was supplied to them, that they would to seek to, I don't know if prosecute's the right word or not, but they would pursue that in line with the code that was provided. What I think we need to work on as well, I've had discussions with Sheriff Pritt in regards to the ability for our SRO officer, Officer Lewis, and other officers to potentially issue tickets. In my discussions with Sheriff Pritt, I think he was open to that as well. I think it's going to be really important to sit down with the sheriff, with obviously the magistrate court, potentially the prosecuting attorney, to be sure that, and obviously with school officials, be it building level administration and teachers, so that we're all on the same page in terms of, trying to find a consistent manner that we deal with these situations as they relate to infraction 1, infraction 2, and trying to head off where we have situations where we have these repeat offenses where multiple times where kids are being caught with this. The other thing is we're also working, I know that our attendance director, Mrs. Schaefer, is scheduled to meet with the probation office tomorrow to discuss the potential for tobacco cessation programs that include vaping. That would also be working in conjunction with Preston Memorial Hospital, as I understand. So, as we'll certainly continue to update the board, and obviously, when we get that group of people together and try to get a consensus plan, we wanna make sure that we communicate that, obviously, to our stakeholders in the school and to our board, before any decisions are made on that line. But I think it's gonna be really important, obviously, this is definitely an issue that's impacting not only the high school, but in some instances trickling down into our middle schools as well. And, we need to deal with it because it's a safety hazard, it is a health hazard, and it's just something that we need to try to curb as much as possible.
While I was fueling my bus this morning, I was talking to another bus driver, and she said she had caught 2 on hers this morning. Now, whether she turned them in to Mr. Plum or, I don't know. But if there is a meeting, Mr. Plum wanted
Absolutely.
he wants to be in that meeting.
For sure.
If there's any way I can help or anything,
Ms.
I don't
Rhodes, I would
wanna
like to
be,
include
I
you in
don't
that
wanna
vote,
be a
for sure.
problem.
You're not.
I wanna hope I can be some sort of a solution. You and I talked, the one evening in the, bus garage. With that paper I gave y'all last time on the code, there's an 8-hour community service. Our custodians are overwhelmed. I mean, they've got a lot to do. I'm sure they would probably like to have a little bit of help with someone pushing a broom down the hall a couple hours every night or something. Whether something like that could be worked out or not, I don't know.
I think logistically, that's some things we need to work out as well. I'm sure there are community organizations that could be potentially assisted by, efforts, volunteer efforts or community service. That's where I think we need to talk with various stakeholders, not only within the school. I agree with you, there will be the potential for service, within our schools, but I think at the county level, there may be also opportunities as well.
But I do believe if we send a message out to some of these kids,
And parents.
the word, and parents also, word will go through the hallways of Preston High like oxygen does. It'll be everywhere. I mean, and, they'll say, well, I don't want to get caught with that. But we have problems with, bathroom, or, on school buses in general. Last spring, there was a student caught masturbating on the bus. I don't know if you all are aware of this or not. I seen the video. He has pants clear down to his knees, and a girl beside him, across the aisle from him. And I guess she happened to glance over and she screamed, got the bus driver's attention, and, he stopped the bus and went on from there. What was done with that, I don't know. But that's a level 4, I believe, violation, and something ought to be done about that. The same student done it again recently. And then this last week, that same student, I guess because he was reprimanded, went into the boys' bathroom in the concourse and took a crap right in the middle of the floor. We can't have this stuff in schools. We just can't have it. Another bus driver, I just learned this Saturday evening, he'd written up a student, 8th grade student, 3 different times. And Brad, you might be aware of this one, I don't know. But when the student was in the principal's office, he threatened him. He says, I'm gonna get me a gun, I'm gonna blow your effing head off. That student needs to be removed from school right now. We cannot take chances like this. Heaven forbid if we have a catastrophe in this county like some of these other states and stuff have. I don't want this county to be a statistic. I like for us to be on top leading on some of this stuff. And another question I have is, someone told me that for each one of these reports, or that goes to the magistrate court, does it cost the county money a filing fee to file these papers?
Not that I've been made aware of, Mr. Rhodes. I mean, all I've received is correspondence.
Mr. Plum told me it's $75 a filing fee, and I can't see that. I cannot see that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's gonna need to be, obviously, that's where we need to have a meeting with the magistrate, with the other stakeholders involved here. I have not been made aware of any type of fee.
Now,
Seeing that may be, often would be.
where are
to
any of
the-
these
to
other
the
incidents?
offender in that instance.
Where any of these other incidences went with the THC and stuff, I have no idea, but I know that Richard Plum has made it aware to me, one need to address the board tonight about that. He has several, the week I caught my 3, he had caught 15 in 3 days. And he's had, whether the rest of them, are like the 2 this morning, whether she reported this or not, a lot of bus drivers don't report it.
But that would be the most
But the
important
fact
feedback.
is, nothing
to
gets
report.
done. What's that now?
That would be the most important feedback, is the bus drivers must report it, to
I
go up the proper
believe
chain
you
of
need to
command to
report
the principal.
anything and everything,
Right.
whatever it may be. These bus drivers, I mean, I've been in transportation all my life, and Preston County's got to be some of the roughest roads, territories, areas that I've ever driven in, as far as driving truck or even driving school bus. And these school kids are the most precious commodity of anything that I've ever hauled. And I value these children. And I don't want to see anything happen to any of them, anywhere in the county, especially my school bus. So, anybody have any questions?
Just a quick comment. Thank you for coming again. It is being looked at. The board, I think I can speak for all of us for taking it seriously. The things that you mentioned, we don't know until it gets to us. And a lot of that has to be handled at the school, Mr. Martin, before we get it. So a lot of things you say, did you know? We don't if it's not here. And that's not handled necessarily publicly, because those are executive sessions.
I understand.
So what I want you to know is it's not that we're ignoring you, but a lot of things, I can tell you, a lot of things you told us tonight I've never heard, plus what you had told us.
I don't know, Brad, have you been aware of any of these things that I've stated here?
Mr. Rhodes, unfortunately, I can't publicly speak on
Well,
that.
okay, I understand, but.
And then it comes to us, and then, because right now, we can't do anything. By law, we're not supposed to.
I understand.
That's his job to invest with the bus driver, Mr. Plum, the principal, since Mr. Knotts is here. If it would be a Brewston kid, he would start the procedure, the way I understand. And then it moves up the line, and last is us.
And these students they caught with the THC was high school students. You know, this is buses coming from out of school such as Brewston on the King Road and whatever. So thank you for your time and.
Thank you, Mr.
And if I can be any help, I'm gonna keep coming back till something's done.
Mr. Rhodes, what I would say is, obviously, when we get these groups together, I would certainly, if you would be willing, we'd love to have you part of that.
If I can be part of the meeting, like I said, I don't wanna be a problem, I wanna help be a part of the solution.
Appreciate it.
And anything we can do. Thank you for
We
your time.
appreciate you.
Thank you for being here, for sure.
Okay, next, I'm going to introduce Mr. Knotts again, because it's now the LSIC, and then you will introduce whoever, since I don't know who's who.
Well, let's go ahead and just go around the room and I'll introduce the members of the LSIC that we have here this evening. There is Mrs. Vrabel, who teaches 4th grade, Mr. Thomas from business interests in the area. There is Mrs. Connor, who's actually a retired kindergarten teacher here, who's one of our community members and still involved in the school. And Mrs. Moran, our school secretary, who's here as well. So we have a few slides that we want to share with you tonight and some data. So one of the things that we focused on this year is our vision for this school is your future, our passion. When we're talking about our students, when we're talking about our kids, we are focused on trying to get them ready for their future, but that takes the passion of our staff, of our teachers, of our community. And of course, as you know, the past couple of years, that has taken a hit due to COVID, not just from the teacher standpoint, the burnout standpoint, but also trying to get the community reconnected back into the school. So those are some of the things that we're looking for as we move forward into the future. I'm sure you've all seen our public GSA data from last year. This is proficiency data. And of course, we have recouped some of where we started from during the pandemic. We're not there yet, but we're getting there. This shows it broken down by grade. There are some bright spots in here. 4th grade proficiency last year. You had almost 68% proficiency in math. We are kind of an outlier school in the rest of the Preston County and the rest of West Virginia. West Virginia as a whole, reading scores tend to be better than math. We're the exact opposite. Our math scores tend to be better than our reading. Now, looking at this, we have some work to do. One of the things we're looking at right now is 5th grade and 6th grade. And of course, those kids have moved up. They're now 6th and 7th graders. But 5th grade has been an area where we've focused with the academic coaches, and we've also looked at compartmentalizing some science and social studies to better involve writing into those activities, which is a county need. And one of the things that we're also looking at, and this is something that GSA doesn't show you, is when you get down into the primary levels, our primary growth has been wonderful. And so we're hoping that we can keep that up as those kids get up into 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade. Now, there's a lot of things that GSA data doesn't show you that's hidden inside the GSA data and also outside of the GSA data that we have to look at iReady for. This is our iReady from the beginning of last year compared to the end of last year. If you looked at the beginning of last year, and that's this bottom line, I know it's kind of hard to see, but we were looking at probably 50 to 55% of our student body was in yellow, meaning they were a grade level behind. By the end of that year, that had been cut down to about 24%. So you're seeing phenomenal growth in there, and it's slowly starting to be reflected in the GSA. One of the other things that is happening too that we see when we drill down a little bit further and we look at some of our subgroups is that we are seeing kids making 2 and 3 grade levels of advance last year in iReady. So we're seeing that growth, and we're also seeing that growth up here in the primary levels. Kindergarten last year was pretty much all in the green except for about 2 students out of 70. They were flagged as still being mid-level kindergarten as opposed to end-of-the-year kindergarten. But those students are ones that we've also have started going through the student assistance team process, and the 1st grade teachers have flagged them as well to continue to monitor those in particular kids. And also when you look at 1st grade and things like that, those scores have also been very good growth. So there's a little bit of a disconnect that we're seeing from the GSA to what we're seeing in iReady. We're seeing very good growth, steady growth, solid growth in iReady, and we're starting to see bits and pieces of that reflected into the GSA. As one of the things Mrs. Moyers had mentioned that is a concern in the GSA is it's not necessarily that the kids don't know the concept, don't know the standard, it's the way the question is asked. So sometimes you end up, and I hate to use this phrase, but you have to teach kids how to take the test. Some of the things that we're very proud of here at this school, beyond just the academics, the academic progress, and the things like that, are the activities that our kids are involved in, the hands-on activities that you see every day in the school. On the left is Miss Price. This is her kindergarten class. They do every Friday. They do a STEAM activity or some type of cooking activity or healthy nutrition activity at the end of the day. You have Mrs. Burnsworth on the right in 5th grade that was teaching hands-on science activities. This year with the new science standards, science in the elementary level is supposed to be about 50% hands-on. So we're starting to see more and more of that happen within our classrooms, whereas before, the way the state had science curriculum, it was maybe just something from a book or an article, not necessarily kids being able to go and get their hands dirty. We also like doing experiential learning activities. One of the things we did a couple weeks ago, we had the opportunity, we had some community members come in and do apple butter as part of a fundraiser for the 8th grade trip, but we also turned that into an activity for the whole school. So not just kids learning how to make apple butter, but also learning about how that ties in with the culture, with some of the history of Preston County, and also looking at some of the things that they're learning in math class, like measuring volume, those kind of things, and seeing how they actually translate. All right, you have a 30-gallon copper kettle, how many apples do you need to fill that up? So doing those kind of activities. And plus that also gets the community involved in the school as well. And we're trying to reconnect with our community and get people back into the building after COVID. And again, not just making apple butter and giving kids some experiences they won't forget, but also Mrs. Everline's 3rd grade class on the left has been doing RCD units involving rain gauges and measurement and the weather and looking at the science aspects of it, but also the math aspects of that. And then we have in social studies in middle school in the 6th grade class, which covers ancient civilizations. Students had the opportunity to write their own cuneiform tablets and learn that as a hook to get into ancient civilizations, because if you're an old social studies teacher like I am, ancient civilizations is one of the hardest things to get kids interested in, because they always ask, why do I need to know this? Our art teacher has been really involved in not just the art standards, but also trying to tie things in what the kids are learning in the classrooms. So for Dot Day, for instance, one of the things that the county is doing as a whole in math is focusing on geometry at the early levels. So Scott, our art teacher, was trying to tie in some geometric standards into Dot Day, into his art. Last year, our boosters, thankfully, were able to help us out by purchasing a book machine. We were the first school in probably north central West Virginia, if not the state of West Virginia, to have a book machine. Basically, kids can earn tokens from their teachers. They go to the machine, pop their token in, they get to pick a book, it's theirs to keep. So we've gotten more books into more kids' hands that way. And probably this year we have given away, I would say, at least 150 books so far through that. And we're not even a month into school. So hopefully there'll be more involved in that. One of the strengths that we have, and I'm going to turn this over to Mrs. Grable, and she can attest more to this, is the relationships that we build between student and teacher and student and community.
I know the last time I spoke to the board was after model schools, and I talked a lot about the relationships and those connections and how important they are. We're really working on that at Preston. But I do want to say that Preston, the student and teacher connections that we have going on here at Preston are kind of unlike any that I've really seen in my past before. And for those who don't know, I've been in education for about 25 years. And I've been in multiple roles in rural, suburban, urban districts, Michigan, Ohio, New York, just in a variety of places. And there's just something really unique and special about what I see at Preston. Our student and teacher connections, and I think I had told you the last time I spoke, was that there are studies, a number of studies, that show if a child can make 3 positive staff connections, very strong connections with a staff member, in somewhere between K and 12, their post-education success rate beyond high school is somewhere between 94 and 97%, depending upon what study you look at. And I frequently say, well, why can't we be those 3 right here in our school where we are now? And I think that Preston is really doing that. And that speaks volumes here at this school. And anyone who has any connection or history with the school knows how much the staff here really pours themselves into the students here. How much the parents are extremely committed. And the community stands behind us here and jumps in. You know, you saw the presentation earlier of the people who had come in and said, well, they have a need. Let's go take care of it. During their work hours, taking the time off and coming in and doing what they need to do. Taking those and eating those costs instead of out making money for their companies, their businesses and such. They're here doing what needs to be done here at Preston. Those kinds of connections are woven through Preston in so many different levels, between school, the teachers, the students, the community. You saw a lot of the experiential learning that was going on up here. That's just a drop in the bucket of all of the things that we have going on. We could have put 50 to 70 pictures up there from just things from this year alone. When we look at our relationships and our connections, people always say, well, what's so special about Brewston? What's unique about Brewston? Let me put it this way. I live in Fairmont. I could teach or be in a position anywhere, that direction and all the way up to here, and I keep choosing to come back to Brewston. And that just really says a lot. I'm in Preston County. Everyone says, you drive so far. With construction, well, hour and a half sometimes, one way. They say, you drive so far, and I said, you don't understand until you get to Brewston. And I know Ms. Swiger was here a little bit earlier. She had to go, but she was here a little bit earlier, and she has transferred from one position in the county to Brewston. And she was saying she feels something here too that's just different. When we talk to other teachers that are throughout the county, and they come across our Brewston students, whether it be out in the community, or whether it be at the middle school or at the high school level, they speak great things about the students from Brewston. And they see patterns there with students coming from Brewston being really positive in a wonderful environment. And very well-rounded. So I know we have a lot of things that we're working on with academics, but we're also working on those connections. So our children are not just successful here, not just on the state test, not just in their academic subject or in their grade level, but lifelong. So that is the goal with that. I think I've mentioned to you some of the, the connections, the percentages. One of the things I want to mention, and you saw that in some of these pictures. I know Mr. Knotts talked about the data that's moving and how we're seeing that underlying data that children are making more than a year of growth, 2 years growth, when they're multiple years behind. Part of that has to do with these connections. A child does not feel comfortable taking an intellectual risk in the classroom, intellectual risk in their school, if they don't feel those kind of connections and support. And the fact that they feel it speaks volumes about the fact that they're willing to take those chances. They're understanding that mistakes bring good things and that it's okay to make mistakes. I tell my students all the time, Formula 409 is called 409 for a reason. It took 409 tries to get it right with professional scientists. How many tries do we need to get to where we need to go? So students are understanding that it's okay to take those intellectual risks, and most of that comes back to that bonded community that's here at Brewston. So I really can't say more positive things about Brewston. It's a really wonderful place to be, and if you ever get a chance to be here, come. We're a pretty welcoming community with among the teacher to teacher, student to student, community student, community teacher building. It's a pretty amazing place to be.
And that's really our major goal, is trying to make sure that our kids are ready for the next level, ready for high school, ready for middle school. Because once they hit high school, man, things start to happen very quickly. Next thing you know, they're getting ready for college, career exploration, they're getting ready to look at the workforce. So we've got to get them ready so they can hit the ground running when it comes to that. Now with that, we do have some concerns and needs here. No school is without their concerns and needs. Some of those we just wanted to bring to your attention. The first one is actually, in a way, a good problem to have. We have no space. We are completely out. And that's because we're a growing area. We have about between 620, 650 students this year, pre-K through 8. If we have to add another classroom for a grade level, we're ripping out the computer lab or putting a trailer in. That's where we stand as far as space. The other thing is, this is an old building. This is multiple different additions. Our HVAC system, and trying to make sure that we can have AC in all the rooms. We have window units in all the rooms, but some of those window units are not the most energy efficient, and some of those units are also very old too. They're kind of on their last leg. We've been fortunate with the levy in that the middle school units have been replaced with outside-inside units, and we hope that that can continue through the elementary side of the building. Obviously, with an old building, it's difficult for an old building to handle the electrical use of modern classrooms. When you have kids and their devices, when you have smart boards and you bring that kind of information, that kind of technology into the mix, sometimes we end up tripping breakers. And then we talked about, and I showed you guys some of the drop ceiling and lighting concerns that we have in some areas of the building that really just need a good refresher done to them. From a curricular standpoint and from a learning standpoint, one of the biggest focuses this year that we have is on social emotional learning. And that's not just here, that's a thing nationwide. And that is because our kids are coming to us with trauma. Our kids are coming to us with issues. And we need to be able to work through those issues with those kids and help them deal with whatever kind of social emotional things they have in order for them to be ready to learn. We also have to work through social emotional learning to try to teach kids things like sharing, things like being kind, things like being responsible, those kind of character traits that the workforce demands and that society demands too. So those are some things that we are working on from a major standpoint. Something else, and this is not just unique to Brewston, this is not just unique to Preston County, this is a West Virginia thing, this is a nationwide thing, is we're seeing more and more kids coming to us typically from traumatic backgrounds that are coming to us with extreme behaviors. We need help in dealing with those kind of extreme behaviors because all too often those are things that are manifestations of abuse, they are manifestations of neglect, they are manifestations of mental health issues. Those are things that your classroom teacher is just not trained and capable of taking care of on their own. We need dedicated support to help those kind of kids, and sometimes the regular classroom environment is not the best environment to take care of that. Ultimately, you want to work with the child to try to get them back to the regular classroom environment, but one of the things that we need, and that it's not just here, it's everywhere, is that kind of dedicated help and that dedicated support, which ties hand in hand with mental health services within the school. There are some things, some kids that we have coming to us that your school counselor, even with their training, it's just beyond their abilities. And this is a problem in West Virginia as a whole because there just aren't enough mental health providers for the number of kids that we're seeing that are coming to us. One of the things that we've reached out to the Board of Ed, and I've talked to Mr. Martin about this before, reaching out to the county office, is some technical support and assistance when it comes to special ed. We have an issue with phonics in our special ed kids, and that's one of those things that as much as a district as we have put in to teaching phonics and monitoring phonics from a classroom observation standpoint, from a special ed classroom standpoint, we're asking for technical assistance when it comes to our special ed instruction, particularly with phonics. And finally, one of our concerns that we have is the need to maximize the funding opportunities that we have. We've been fortunate in that we've used our levy funding, we've used Step 7 funding, and we've used school and community funding to try to replace a lot of old student classroom furniture. Some of our student classroom furniture dates back 30 years. It's just well past its prime, it's past its age. It's time to send it out to that great school and beyond. So we need ways to try to maximize our funding opportunities, and as an LSIC, one of the ways that we were looking at doing that would be being able to open up to more vendors. Because in a school system, the way we're structured, we have to order from places that take a purchase order, which might not necessarily be the cheapest vendor. So one of the things we were asking as an LSIC was looking into P-card options for the schools to allow us to shop by price rather than do they take a purchase order. Some things we wanted to share with you that are accomplishments here at Brewston that the levy, that the taxpayers have helped us with, and that we hope they continue to help us with. Some big ticket items that we've done. The gym floor has been completely refinished and resurfaced and resealed. We have brand new middle school AC units. These are very energy efficient, and you will never have seen happier faces than you saw the middle school teachers when those got working this year. The paving around the building, all of this back here used to be gravel and potholes, and it was just constantly being more gravel poured on top of it, then the potholes would come again, then the rain would wash it off. That's been fortunate enough with the paving that it is all nice, newly paved, and I believe the first seal coating for it is probably slated to be next year for it. So we're looking at keeping that up. The levy has funded us with additional staff to keep our class sizes small. We have a first grade teacher, we have a kindergarten teacher that are funded through the levy to keep those small, which is incredibly important at the primary level. And we also have 2 service personnel. We have a cook and a custodian that are funded through the levy. Last year, at the end of the year, one of the needs that I've talked with Mr. Martin about is the need for security cameras inside and outside the building. That is in the process to actually install the cameras, but one of the levy things that funded it at the very end of last year was running all of the cabling, which honestly was the biggest chunk of that project. And then painting supplies to help with the painting that we've done, and then also we were able to purchase about 15 additional staff radios so that every grade level has at least one teacher with a radio. All of our special ed teachers and special needs teachers have a radio, and anybody who has a special needs student that we feel from a safety standpoint they need to have a radio has one. So those are some of the things that we've been able to do with our levy funds. And from a community standpoint, we've been able to leverage our community into helping extend those levy funds. We did a beautification day earlier this month, and it wound up being one of the hottest Saturdays of the summer. And we were out there shoveling river rock, getting rid of mulch, deep cleaning some of the bathrooms, some of the places that you normally just don't get to over the course of the year, like the piping that runs above everything, and getting down into some of the cracks and crevices of the wall. And kids got into it too, because it's important for the kids to take pride in their building. Pride is contagious, and this is one of the things that we're working on as a school, particularly in our middle school. Our middle school, I don't want to say tends to get lost in the shuffle, but sometimes feels like they're overshadowed by the elementary. So some of the things we're doing this year is we have started a process to formally name our Bulldog mascot. It is an audition process, an interview process that the middle school students have to go through. They understand they're not just here for sporting events. They're going to be out in the community in parades and other things like that. We actually did 4 or 5 student interviews today for that. And it was also important not just for the kids to learn that kind of responsibility, but also for them to just go through an interview process. Because ultimately they're going to have to do it whenever they go out to find a job. So that's pretty much an overview of Brewston. We appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. For those that come in on the committee, thanks for coming tonight. Mr. Knox, also, thank you again for opening your school for our board meeting. We appreciate it. Okay, going on, Miss Nicole Shea. Michelle, I want to ask too, because you signed up on the sheet, is it just once you want to speak or twice? Okay. I'm just asking, so that way I don't have to call your name again.
Good evening, Board of Education members and superintendent. After reading the agenda for this meeting, I felt so deeply come back. When I first spoke, I gave all the reasons to why our children desperately needed Kingwood schools. Today I've come to tell you how desperate we are for education in our region. I cannot begin to describe how Rulesburg as a whole has become depleted over the last few years since the levy passed. I've come here because we personally chose Kingwood, but Kingwood wasn't the only choice. Ms. Schaefer could probably give you the exact numbers, but I do know there are 7 kids from Rollsburg going to the West Virginia Academy in Morgantown, 2 to Aurora, 3 to Tunnelton, 3 to Fellows,ville, and just in 4 families, 17 students are homeschooling. That's a big number. That total, along with the number that transferred to Kingwood area schools, is roughly over 50 students. 50 students would change Rollsburg, but not one family is willing to sacrifice their child just to keep the failing system working. Despite whatever decision is made this evening, transportation out of Rollsburg is inevitable. I know you have each received a lot of information pertaining to our issue over the last 2 weeks, and I know a major concern is everyone wanting a bus ride, opening that can of worms. But if every parent cared as much as I did for transportation, they would come too, asking the same question. If they're not, then they don't want it as badly as they say they do. I hope my points and views have helped guide you all to a solution, and I thank you again for your time.
Thank you. And we will be addressing later in the agenda. Okay. Mr. McCrum, are you wanting to speak or just signing in? No? Okay. And Mr. Thomas, you left. Okay. Right, he was the other, that's not Steve, I just wanna make sure. I saw him, he's gone. Okay, moving on. At this point, I'll take a nomination to recommend the board approve the agenda for 9/26/22.
I'll make that motion.
Second it.
Moved by Ms. Feathers, seconded by Mr. Tatham. Comments or questions? Call for the vote.
Okay, voting is open. Okay, motion passes 4-0.
Moving on, next will be the minutes. Entertain a motion to recommend the board approve the meeting minutes from 9/12/22.
So moved.
Second, moved by Mr. Kisler, seconded by myself. Questions or comments or corrections? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Okay, voting is open. Okay, motion passes 3 yes, 1 abstention.
Okay, superintendent's report next. Mr. Martin?
Okay, board members, you received just a small folder this time, which just kind of details very quickly some of the information I'm going to provide to you. Again, I start with the superintendent's update that was sent out to all employees this morning. You should have received that by email. It starts off with a weekly schedule. We do have a substitute cook class scheduled this week with Mrs. Barner. We're talking continued efforts in terms of trying to obtain substitute personnel. We do have a scheduled 2-hour early dismissal on Thursday, and we of course will be out of school on Friday for school day for Buckley Festival this year. I know that the schools have made a big effort to have more involvement in this year's parades. Several schools will either have formal floats or will have personnel. For example, their service and professional and coach of the year candidates may be riding in vehicles. I know many schools were doing that where in years past we've only seen just a handful. I know that setup for the Buckley Festival exhibits will take place this coming Wednesday, and to my knowledge, schools plan to have large presentations again this year at Kingwood Elementary School. We are out of school on Monday, October 3rd for a professional growth and development day. That will also avail staff's time for faculty senate and other needed trainings that will take place during the course of the day. An item that's mentioned a little bit later on our agenda is, of course, the Board of Education seeking student representatives for the board. That information, I know Mrs. Varner had supplied that to the school last week to disperse out to the student body. We've also put that on the Board of Education Facebook site seeking potential student applicants. The applications will be mailed, and then we'll work in conjunction with the schools in terms of administration and teachers in determining ultimately, we'll have to see also, of course, the number of applicants that we see at this juncture. But I know we had advertised for at least up to 2 potential members, as we've seen in previous years with that process. The Safe Schools requirements, you've seen that on several agendas. This is all code-based trainings that have been required. And again, we've tried to avail the staff with some additional time with the 2-hour early dismissal as well to try to help fulfill that obligation. Emergency Connectivity Fund, as we said at our last meeting. Right now, I've been in communications with both T-Mobile and with US Cellular to get our hotspots reactivated. We have 250 lines through T-Mobile that we're looking to get reinstated. Many of those have already been out in student and staff hands, but we still have a large quantity that can be available for students or staff who need them. US Cellular, we have up to 50 lines. We're reinstating some of the lines that are already out in circulation, and then picking up additional lines as needed. And we have 125 lines that have been afforded through AT&T, and I'm trying to work. AT&T is the one I'm having a hard time getting in contact with the proper representatives to get those activated and ready to go. It's my goal to try this week is to get those active, and then also be actively seeking for those students or staff who'd like that need those as well. This was something I just wanted to include, board members, the West Virginia Balanced Scorecard update. Basically, it lists the designations, and at the bottom, these are many of the academic standards that were utilized to determine our school statuses. We had 2 schools that were actually identified for potential support schools. West Preston School fell into the orange level. They'll receive strategic support. They have had a subgroup, the special needs student subgroup, has been below average in English language arts and math for 3 consecutive years. Brewston School was on the yellow list. Those will actually be supports that will be provided to the school locally. I'll work in conjunction with Mr. Knotts. And for example, some of the strategic requests he's had, for example, for phonics training, that would be one thing for our special needs students. But we'll work in conjunction with Mr. Knotts and his staff to provide whatever supports are necessary for supporting the special needs subgroup for here at Brewston as well. All of our students, and again, what I will try, board members, again, is to have a more detailed assessment for all of our school sites, by our next meeting. This one, I was trying to get everything pulled together, and that was just one thing I was not able to. Now, I would say for West Preston, we do already have a strategic planning meeting scheduled with the State Department is scheduled for, Mrs. Varner, I believe it is October, it's either 7th or 9th. It'll be a teams-based calls with members from the Department of Education, where we're going to get the specifics in terms of what supports will be provided by the State Department, what supports that we're going to be responsible for at a local level. And at that meeting, I know that our special education director, the building principal at West Preston, myself, and I will likely involve our curricular specialists as well to provide whatever supports are necessary to help at West. You can see the curriculum update that's been provided. One thing I did is I actually received training this past week. I went to the WVASA conference, and they provided an update on Senate Bill 704, which that was the bill that came out that allows for parental review of educational materials. And I just wanted to provide some specifics to staff for their review. The one thing I've tried to tell the staff is, we're not necessarily mandating, for example, that they have their required reading lists, and they have. I think these are all good practices. What I wanted to do is to provide them with, these are things that can potentially occur. If there's a parental request, there's a requirement to respond to that request within 10 days. So it certainly would be best served for teachers to be well prepared for those potential inquiries by having either a curriculum guide, their required reading passages, or probably more so at the middle school and high school level, a formal syllabus that's been established. They've also were availed with information in terms of the requirements for their classroom libraries, much less restrictive in terms of documenting your classroom libraries compared to required text and usage in the classrooms. But we wanted to make sure that our teachers received good information on that front that recently came out from our State Department, and I actually even included a copy of the bill as well for their review. So
We just want to make sure that we give good, valid information out to our teachers and staff in reaction to recent legislation. Beyond that, in the superintendent's update, just a number of updates from the Department of Education. I'm trying to rotate those out because that literally is just pages and pages of information. But again, I think some of those all roll from week to week, so that people have an opportunity. It's being presented to them on multiple occasions as well. Quickly, just jumping into my stuff, the maintenance update, as Mr. Knotts alluded to, the mini split AC units here at Brewston have been installed, except for the one in the library, correct, Mr. Knotts? Which would have been awesome to have earlier. That is what it is. Obviously, I'll talk with Mr. Murray to make sure we get that one finished out, but I know that that was very much needed in the middle school section, so I was glad that was able to get accomplished this fall. We've had a scissor lift that has been, literally, we have been waiting for this for, probably about a year, for this scissor lift's arrival. This is gonna allow us to, a lot of work orders where we don't have to necessarily, for example, rent out equipment and so forth. I know, for example, there's bulb changes that tear out East Preston for their gym. We've got banners that need hung here at Brewston and West.
That actually happened this week.
Well, I knew Terry was coming down there. I didn't know if he'd made it up here yet, but I'm glad to hear he got that accomplished. I know Mr. Sines, we have a bullhorn that out at Central Preston that's in need of repair as well. So we're certainly gonna try to attack those things and speak with Mr. Murray now that we have the equipment in place to try to hit some of those things as quickly as possible. Matt also indicated the SBA roof projects at West Preston, which is primarily over on the elementary side, like the third grade hallway, if you're familiar with that section of the building. That's gonna be a section that's gonna be re-roofed in conjunction with the SBA project. Also, the Preston High School ROTC building, he anticipates that work should be starting in the very near future. He's working in conjunction with Mr. Barker with the SBA. H.L. Huffman is scheduled to make needed repairs. I know Mr. Knotts has identified an issue with the gym divider here at Brewston. H.L. Huffman, who's done a lot of our gym divider work, has done a lot of work in our gymnasium settings, is scheduled to be here once they have a crew in the area and make that repair. And from my understanding, Janice, I think they've got a motor that's gonna need to be replaced on that, is from what I've understood is the issue. Mr. Kisner, I know you'd inquired about the dead tree at Terra East Preston. Speaking with Mr. Murray, he's gonna try to get Chris Nicholson on the scene this week. Probably will get it cut. We don't have the ability to grind stumps, so depending upon what we may have to work with an outside vendor to get the stump down after we get that cut down. But Matt said he's gonna certainly try to get that accomplished this week to take care of that for the city over there. The bid submission selections, that's appearing later in our agenda, but we had bid selections for our the SBA projects. We have to have an approved architect firm. We also, for the demolition of the bleachers at West Preston, also for the ceiling and line striping at Central Preston, South Preston, and West Preston. And later in the agenda, of course, the maintenance database is included as well. Technology, we got a great update from Mr. Moyers and Mr. Sines and Mrs. Moyers. A little tongue-tied today. One thing Darla was working on with schools, and I really appreciate her efforts, is work with the Children's Internet Protection Act, SIPA compliance lessons at both the Preston High School and our K-8 schools. As we said, internet hotspots, we were funded for that. Mr. Sines has also been notifying schools of their student acceptable use policies, and those need to be completed at some juncture in the very near future, or we do need to disallow access to the network until those can be completed. So
October 1st.
Yeah, we're trying to actively work with schools to be sure they're well notified so that they can work with their parents to get those completed. And finally, again, thanks to Mr. Sines and Mrs. Moyers for their presentations tonight. Did want to offer some congratulations to Terry Hauser, Samantha Funk, and Robert Varner for their efforts with some of their students recently. Connor Gibson, who was the West Virginia State Champion in tractor driving competition, traveled to Springfield, Mass. Finished third overall in the regional competition. That included students from West Virginia, Ohio, Maryland, and Pennsylvania. In addition, the PHS Ag Mechanics team also traveled to the competition and placed fifth overall. They were composed of Gavin Jennings, Cordell Bolliard, Carson Kidwell, and Jacob Hauser. We do plan to have those students. We're going to formally invite the students and staff to our board meeting at Terre Haute, East Preston. Many of those students actually live in the Terre Haute area, so we thought that would be a good time to recognize those students as well. Also want to congratulate PHS 12th grade student Brian Manco. He actually captured the Big Ten Golf Championships recently, which I don't remember the last time we had a golf champion at PHS, so a very good job by Mr. Manko. Also, Ryan Cole, who's been a longtime coach at Preston High School, was recognized as co-coach of the year. If Coach Cole and Mr. Manko can be present for our next board meeting, I don't know if they'll be done with their season at that point. I was talking to Mr. Huggins, we'll hopefully try to have them at our next meeting as well. I just wanted to commend the PHS Booster organization. I got to attend the homecoming parade last week. I thought that was really cool that they did that. As a PHS graduate, I just was really happy to see some school spirit on display. The band march, they had lots of kids participating, riding in in floats and so forth, and really they had some activities and food vendors down at the Civic Center. Thought it was a very nice event that the Boosters put on. I hope that becomes an annual event. I think it really went a long ways to try to encourage more school spirit at PHS. Last Wednesday, Mrs. Layton, myself, and Mrs. Berry attended the scheduled meeting at the West Virginia Association of School Administrators. We were provided training on Senate Bill 704, which we talked about earlier, the balanced scorecard and identified schools of improvement, which, again, I'll avail the board with some of the PowerPoints that were supplied at those at our upcoming meeting. In addition, I also was able to attend a couple school safety sessions. Unfortunately, Mr. Bettinger was not able to attend, but I'll certainly pass on that information. I know that Mike is scheduled to go to a major safety conference at Charleston on October 3rd. Mrs. Kerstetter and I actually attended a session with Superintendent Roach and Senate President Blair in regards to information in regards to West Virginia Constitutional Amendment 2. The session was designed to provide information about potential impact of the measure if passed by voters in November. I actually received notification today. Superintendent Roach is trying to offer a balanced approach to this. So he also is now made available. I'll have to be traveling to Charleston this Thursday in regards to a session that's being put on by the governor. The governor has a different perspective than the legislature in this instance. So I think Superintendent Roach is trying to offer a balanced view of the issue. I can tell you, I'll certainly try to update the board once I've received information from both perspectives. The information we received the other day, I know there's been a lot of things that from a public school segment with concerns with the passage of Amendment 2 and Amendment 4. Amendment 2, there were some things brought forth that, with our financial people there, there's a lot that's going to have to unfold to see if that could ultimately, potentially be beneficial to school districts. From what we've been told, there's possibilities of such, but again, you have to look at both sides of the issue, so I really wouldn't want to speak to it formally until I receive all info. At this juncture, I believe, Mr. Huggins, that's all I have. However, I would want to turn this over briefly to Mrs. Varner for any updates you'd have in regards to personnel.
Pretty well, guys. When October 8th, so at the next board meeting, I'll have the full layout of certified list. But as of now, it looks pretty good. So running numbers, we are pretty well right on formula, which is a good thing. In professional, I am looking at having 7 in ESERF funds. I have 6.5 in levy, and I am sitting even on state aid. So that is better than last year, because last year I had 9 in ESERF and 9 in levy and 1 over. So we're doing better. And in service, we are sitting in 8 in ESERF, 4 in levy, and 6.5 in federal funds, which we always have federal funds and professional too. And I am actually under 0.52 in service as of now.
So our ESERF, and I said our ESERF position, I believe that's where we were. We were sitting in really good shape on service, and we've had some student needs that have come in. We almost always have to try to stay under on the service side, because we've had some pretty significant student need cases that move in that have required additional staffing levels, particularly for additional aides. We've had to hire multiple aides to assist with some of our new students coming to the district.
So this request for a new position
is included in these numbers.
It is included in there?
Yes.
We're still under with that?
Yep. So.
And greatly appreciate Mrs. Varner's efforts along with Preston and Autumn and working on that as someone who also has worked on the certified list, it is just a long and tedious process. It's just not there's not a quick, easy way to do that. It's time consuming. Really appreciate you guys working on it so hard.
But I'll have a complete breakdown of everything for you guys at the next meeting, so.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, next on the agenda will be superintendent goals. At this time, I entertain a motion to recommend the board approve the 22-23 goals for Superintendent Brad Martin that were mutually agreed upon on 9/15/22.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Kisner, seconded by Mr. Tatham. Comments, discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Okay, voting is open. Motion passes 4-0.
Moving on, service personnel, recommend the board approve the service personnel agenda.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Feathers, second by Mr. Tatham. Questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Voting is open. Motion passes 4-0.
Moving on, professional personnel. Entertain a motion, recommend the board approve the professional personnel agenda.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Feathers, second by Mr. Tatham. Questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Voting is open. Motion passes 5-0.
Excuse me, next on the agenda, out-of-state field trips. These field trips will include from Brewston, West, Central, and South. So at this time, I entertain a motion to recommend the board approve the submitted out-of-state field trip request.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Feather, seconded by Mr. Kisner. Any questions, concerns, discussion?
I just wanted to point out that I did look, and out of the 6 requests for field trips, 5 of which were funded by the levy. So thank you to the Preston County voters. Our kids, once again, get to experience some education out in the world.
Any other comments? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Voting is open. Okay, motion passes 4-0.
Thought I was gonna be Jack there for a second. Okay, moving on. I'm picking on Mr. Cow because invariably he would hit the wrong button, and I thought I just did. And he's not here to defend himself, so I'll say what I said. Okay, the next is for discussion only, which we've touched upon, but there's still more student board member application.
Yeah, just to reiterate to the board, again, as per discussion at the previous meeting, Mrs. Varner provided information last week to administration and guidance. We've also put a public notification seeking potential student applicants for the process. We're looking for any 11th or 12th grade student who would be interested in serving. If you look at the application, we've tried to provide some obligations of the student, but also the potential gain that they would gain from potential board membership. We've asked for just some basic demographic information, along with some activities and honors, and then also asked for a brief essay. Again, those will be submitted to my attention, and then I'll work in conjunction with school administration and staff in order to select potential candidates that we can be presented to the board for potential approval.
Thank you.
Looking forward to that being done.
Yeah. If you have an applicant with the last name Feathers, please see that it is discarded.
I wondered about that, Mrs. Spears.
This room isn't big enough for both of us.
Okay, next on the agenda is the intra-county transfer. And at this point, I'll entertain a motion, entertain a motion, Mr. Martin, that will recommend action.
There's a motion.
Okay. Entertain a motion to recommend the board approve the morning transportation only contingent upon a signed parental agreement to depict students updating in the afternoon for the Rollsburg area students seeking to attend Central Preston Middle School and or Kingwood Elementary School for the 22-23 school year. So moved.
I'll second it for discussion.
Moved by Mr. Kisner, seconded by Ms. Feathers. Discussion, questions, comments?
I kind of feel like another episode of Who's on First with our, the policy edits and such.
The policy edits, I've made two different policy edits
Yeah.
depending upon the board's actions in terms of if they would make, if you would choose to make an action. The policy edits you were supplied with, one would be is if the board would vote to avail Rollsburg students transportation for the AM only. There's also policy reference if you would to request for that change to be provided both AM and PM. If the board votes against the measure, then there would be no policy change in regards to this. If the vote is taken tonight, Mrs. Feathers, what we would then do is, based upon the decision that you all make, I would present the revised policy at our next meeting for potential approval.
So, but the recommendation is for morning travel only?
Yes.
Morning transportation only?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was the reasoning for not providing afternoon transportation?
Outside of policy and additional cost, again, at the board's discretion, the motion can be changed at the will of the board.
What would that mean, because when we talked about it last time, what would that cost be?
Mrs. Varner, actually, some of the information that was provided to you in your packets, we factored in, for example, 8 overtime at the most senior aide at Kingwood Elementary and the most senior aide at Central Preston. And Angie, approximately over a 2-week pay period, it was going to be in the avenue of about $162
Together.
for each pay period.
And how many pay periods? 2 pay periods a month or one?
Yes.
2 pay periods a month.
So basically $300 a month?
Yes.
And you'd have to use overtime to do it?
Yes.
At Kingwood Elementary, there may be the possibility, it depends on the number of students that would be having to supervise there. I know they've got some of the special needs students there may require almost independent supervision. So, I think I wanted to be a conservative on this, Mr. Tatum, to factor on the high side, but I didn't want to give a low estimate. I would rather estimate on the high side, the potential high side.
And the busing from school back home, would there be anything, like any of the runs be changed, or are they pretty much?
No, it would just be the lag in terms of when they would be picked up, because they're gonna have to ride the Preston High School bus back to Rollsburg.
And what is the lag time again?
Schools dismiss roughly at 2:30. Preston High starts sending students out at 3:15. I would say buses probably departing by 3:25-ish.
So essentially, we have additional cost asking a teacher to stay, being paid, but we have the additional time that we're asking someone to stay an extended period. And then these kids, the students in question will be sitting around for roughly an hour before the bus came.
An hour to 45
Right.
minutes, yes. Now, a couple pieces of information that the board asked for last time. I received I submitted an email to State Transportation Director Dave Baber who indicated from a code or legality standpoint, there was no restriction if we would bring the students in. While it's good practice, obviously, to offer return transportation, it is not required in this instance, because of the fact we have policy that when individuals go through the inter-county transfer process, policy states that they're not to be provided transportation with the exception of Fellows-Ville area students being able to attend South Preston based upon our busing patterns. That's where, if a decision was to be made to provide transportation, either AM or both AM and PM, we would need to make the applicable policy change to align with our practice.
Right. Do they have an after-school Explorers?
They do, and now I would say this, After School Explorers requires a 2-hour session. And I know that's been one request that schools are saying is why After School Explorers, for example, they can't ride the buses. It's because definitively the federal requirements through the ASE grant require for it to be a 2-hour session. So we can't put a student in there for a half hour and then send them home. That's to be enacted at all schools this year.
And you said the lag time, sorry, was a half hour to 45 minutes?
I would say 45 minutes to an hour, depending upon if they would pick up on the front end or the back end.
I appreciate the time put into this, Ms. Barter. I believe I would agree with the recommendation of the superintendent.
Any other questions or comments? I've got a question as far as regulatory. Okay, so the motion's on here, so we vote on it in case somebody else would want something different, correct?
If they want something different, they could amend it.
Right now,
Or
I'm voting
we
on
could,
this.
or we could vote it down and start with a brand new motion.
Okay,
But
so that's why I'm making sure I'm right parliamentary. Okay, thank you, but
And Mr. Huggins, if it ends in any tie situation, would result in failure of the motion.
tonight, okay. Okay, any other questions or concerns? Okay, call for the vote.
Okay, voting is open. Mr. Knott, can you turn the projector back on? We need to have the board actually. It's one of the minimized, scoreboard needs to be up. Okay, motion passes 4-0.
Okay, so we do have transportation for Rollsburg one-way.
And board members, what I will do, I will confer with the transportation department and just advise when this service can start, and then we'll reach out to all Rollsburg area students to let them know when this service will begin. And in addition, I will bring forth at the next meeting a revised policy that's in line with the vote that you've taken tonight for potential approval.
Okay. Moving on, student vaping. And this is discussion information.
Yes. This was obviously in reaction to, Mr. Rhodes has been in our last 2 meetings. It was returned, this agenda item was returned from the 9/12 meeting. Again, I spoke with Mrs. Schaefer this afternoon. She is scheduled to meet in conjunction with County Probation Office and Preston Memorial to develop a tobacco, I always say this wrong, cessation program for first-time offenders. One thing that's going to happen, what I mentioned to Mr. Rhodes, is I think it's going to be really important for us to systematically look at the issue and see what's going to be the best way that we need to deal with this. Kind of a systematic approach, whereas if first offense is the cessation program, if second offense is then some level of school disciplinary actions. Third offense, for example, if we look at it like a baseball analogy, third strike, it would be maybe the potential law enforcement referral to the magistrate, which we do have a center response from Magistrate Grimm that indicated that, I think we're gonna need to get the specifics though. I know one discussion was, are there any potential fees? And we would need to clarify very specifically from the magistrate what information needs to be provided to the magistrate in order for them to be able to effectively pursue potential legal proceedings. Would they simply follow the code? As we read the code that was provided to us, first offense, I believe, was listed as a $50 fine and 8 hours of community service. So I think the next thing too is to look at how do we structure that community service? Is it a combination of service in our specific schools, community organizations, county government? I think there's a lot of potential options there, but I think we would need to kind of have all those things laid out, so that we know when a community service referral is provided, how we're going to systematically place students amongst that and how we're going to properly supervise them through that process. So I can't say that we're immediately ready for this, but I think that's kind of the course of action. To me, I think we really need to, step one is you've got to give the kid the opportunity to provide with education as to the health risk and that this is detrimental to them, and give them some education on how, hopefully you can avoid this behavior moving forward. The second step is obviously if you're a repeat offender. Now, one thing that I am going to have to very clearly communicate to our schools, and I'm going to be honest with you, I feel that this has probably been an error. Mr. Knotts, I know I spoke with you about this. I mean, very specifically within the existing policy 4373, specific to infractions related to tobacco, is we are not supposed to suspend students externally for these types of infractions. It very clearly stipulates that in policy 4373. It's kind of weird because it contradicts itself, because as some of the possible interventions, an external suspension is one that is typically permitted in almost all level 3 infractions except this one. And I think part of it is because the nature is this is a potential addiction issue that you need to try to deal with proactively on the front end. That throwing a kid out of school was not necessarily going to solve this problem. I'm sure that was probably the intent of the legislation. So I would tell you, board members, I mean, it will be, I certainly plan to continue to work to this end, to kind of work in conjunction with our schools, our principals, our local law enforcement. Again, we've been in contact with Sheriff Pritt and Officer Lewis, so that we know procedurally what we need to, what needs to accomplish for them to be able to issue a ticket properly through this whole process. I just think we need to get all of the specifics laid out, and then we need to obviously communicate that to our schools and our parents that, this is, moving forward, that this is how we're going to deal with vaping issues in Preston County. That is in line with existing policy related to policy 4373, but we're going to try to build out some systems so that, I think in years past we've kind of dealt with this ad hoc, and schools have all probably dealt with it a little bit differently. I really would like to see a more systematic approach to this, that we're kind of doing, for the most part, taking similar actions for all students. But I also don't want, I know we're saying that law enforcement and the magistrate court system can get involved. I just don't feel like that should be step one. Like, we would inundate the courts. We don't want to, bog them down through this. We need to take preventative action at the school level where it eventually builds to that level. So, I mean, from my perspective, that's the direction I would like to see this go, but I would certainly open it up to the rest of the board members for any discussion you'd like to have.
I think it's a positive direction that we've kind of been harping about, is follow through and support. And we need that as a community, because the school needs the magistrate court, the school needs the sheriff's department. And this seems like a great place to start. Where else? But we need to keep that vibe going. And just like Mr. Knott said, that a lot of the bus drivers don't report it because nothing's going to be done. We need to kick that persona out the door and turn that around. I'm sorry. Yeah.
But I would say
Mr. Knox was looking confused.
But to the benefit of our schools, I would say it is, if it's reported, it's dealt with. I mean, there's discipline that's enacted, that's within policy.
Right.
Whether that's perceived that way or not, but I know the perception is we should throw them out for however many days, but we can't. Number one, we can't do that.
One of the problems occurs coming from within the school system in the past. Unfortunately, a lot of discipline issues cannot be told what was done.
Right.
They get told it gets handled. The frustration comes from the teacher or the bus driver. What? and the principal looks at you and says, because they're following the law, I really can't tell you. I'm.
It's verbal
I-
violation.
I'm- You know,
Disclose that.
and so that's a frustration that we somehow, and which builds back from the trust of them. If they see we're doing something, when the principal says it's being handled, they go, okay, it is. We may not know what, you know what I'm saying? So that kind of is going with what Ms. Feathers is saying as well, because from within the system, the teacher always felt, well, I sent him to the office, why won't you tell me what you did? Well, I can't. And the bus driver, whether it's true or not, if it's perceived to be true, unfortunately, it goes out feeling like it's true.
Well, and I think, you know, again, a big step in the right direction is building that relationship with the magistrate court system, with law enforcement, working with the prosecutor. And I think all of those entities are very cooperative and willing to do that, but we've got to be willing to work together on it.
Right.
If I may, a couple of things. I think number one, we see a lot of success at Camp Dawson Challenge Academy, and I think that's because kids know that there's a zero tolerance. I personally believe it should be swift, quick, and to the point. I'm fine with the build-up, but I don't think it should be drug out. I will say that to the point of nothing's been done. When something is done and the child feels it, child talks. They tell their friends, you don't want to mess with this. That sets the precedence. That's how word gets out. We don't have to tell people what's happening. The child will tell people, will tell the other students, and that will become the reputation that I believe that we want in trying to diverge some of this. If you look at your policy 43, I forget your number, 4373, on 126 CSR 99, habitual violation of school rules or policies is grounds for suspension. So this is a school rule. Multiple offenses of that, to me, would qualify as being allowed to suspend a student if it comes to that. I'm not saying that's the first thing. I want kids being educated, so that is our goal. I would prefer that we do things like fines, tickets, community service first. But I do believe setting a wall that the kids hit and they understand there is no way through this wall, let's get focused on education, would be our best route from my perspective.
Yeah, I understand that mentality. Like I said,
Yeah.
the one thing I would have you look at is on page 54 with those
Correct.
handouts.
Correct. I agree with that we
Out
cannot
of school
suspend a child
suspensions,
for
not an
tobacco.
intervention strategy that
Correct.
supports treatment of substance abuse.
Right.
And shall not be used for possession, use of imitation drugs, inhalants, or tobacco nicotine.
Right.
Can I just jump in real quick, Mr. Superintendent? If we're talking specifically to what Mr. Rhodes was saying about buses, why couldn't they, for after a first offense, just be expelled from the privilege of using the bus?
You can do that, and we have done that. In that instance, for example, that was a 5-day suspension from the bus.
So I think like for a second offense for vaping, you had one offense, you brought in other people, second offense, expelled from the bus, say, for a certain amount of time. Third offense could be go to magistrate court or just expelling from the bus for the remainder of the year and just be done with it.
Yeah, in terms of bus transportation, because that is a privilege and not a right, that can occur. My concern is, Mr. Rhodes brings up his concerns on the bus. I mean, we have kids vaping in restrooms and everywhere else.
I understand that.
Then we have to deal with that in a different manner. I agree.
The bus is simple because that's a privilege.
I agree. I think the bus can be dealt with differently than in other situations, Mr. Tatham, you're exactly correct.
But for the record, Mr. Mark, I completely agree with you that the guidance says that tobacco use would not be a suspendable offense, but the disregard of rules in general
Agreed.
would be.
And I agree with you.
That
That's,
said,
and
again,
that's under the, I think, level 2.
Right,
And
right,
it's habitual violation of
Correct,
rules.
correct. So that's all I was saying was we do have that option. And the final, I guess, input that I would have to that is, part of the importance, again, not that we tell somebody what happens, but I do feel that there is a consensus among their teachers that they don't feel like that to an extent that they've been supported in some of these things when they're reporting, and our bus drivers. And again, picking up some of our immediate, more strict punishments gives them that faith that they are supported in their issues and in trying to do their job and trying to focus on the students. And that would be my final input. But thank you for your.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime,
And my last question is, have we talked to the fact that Mr.
Your last one was
Did I?
last
Yeah, I
one.
know. I always say that. Everybody has time. I'm sorry.
That's his famous
But
last word.
we had reached out to the magistrate court, and Mr. Rhodes had indicated that he did know somehow that they were summoned to the magistrate court and whatever that situation was. But I would have assumed that the prosecuting attorney would have to be directly involved with anything that gets sent to the magistrate court. Am I incorrect in that?
I have not formally spoken to Mr. Shea yet. I can follow up with him certainly as we move through this process. I'll have communications with Mr. Shea or someone within his staff. like I said, the code reference magistrate proceedings is why I kind of
Yes, and
started
that's,
there.
yeah. Well, I said I knew it would end up.
I
in
think
the
we're
court,
gonna need to follow
but
up with Mr. Shea
I
as
do
well.
think we're gonna need a communication with Mr. Shea in
Agreed.
general. Again, truancy is going to have some, we're gonna have to be being tighter on that based on some other stuff from our training with the state. And so there are, having that relationship and already an open dialogue, I think is beneficial to all parties to let him know we are interested in getting kids focused.
And I would say Mr. Shea is very open to, dialogue with the school
Fantastic.
district. I mean, I think tries to be very, very cooperative, so I don't anticipate that would be an issue whatsoever.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, moving on, work session procedures.
This item was requested by Mr. Kisner in regard to public work sessions, they would be recorded or unrecorded. Currently, sessions, our general practice has been that sessions have not been recorded, but minutes are taken and recorded. Mr. Kisner asked for this to be a potential voting item on this agenda.
I'd like to move that we record and make available for the same way that, I'm sorry, let me rephrase. I would like to make a motion that we record our work sessions and that they are available in the same way that our board meetings are for review to the public.
Can you repeat that one? Is moving to record. Mr. Kisner's moving to record and
Make available for review our work sessions in the same way we do our regular board meetings.
Okay, we have a motion. I don't normally do that, but one more time, if you'd read it, so we know
Sure,
what the motion is.
and Mr. Kisner, you can clarify. Mr. Kisner's moving to record and make available for review information from work sessions like is done for regular board meetings.
Correct. The same way that we stream and have available where we can look at a previously recorded.
Are we talking just recording or streaming also?
I can do either. I can record it and not stream it.
I thought we were already streaming our work sessions. That's not required under sunshine law?
Because
It's
it's a work
public, so
session.
it's an open
It's public
meeting.
meeting.
Right.
That's open.
So I thought it was already streamed based on it being a public meeting.
Because it's just a work session. It's everybody's allowed to attend, which we advertise and put it there.
Yeah. I'm open to it being streamed. I just think if you would like to get your second first for discussion, I'm open to discussing that. I follow your parliamentary procedure.
And you're my parliamentarian, so don't mess me up.
So again, the motion's out. It's, Mr. Kisner is moving to record and make available for review information from work sessions like is done for regular board meeting proceedings.
I'll second the motion for discussion.
Okay, it's been properly moved by Mr. Kisner, second by Ms. Feathers. And any questions, comments, discussion?
So I guess I brought this up because I felt like we had some really good work sessions brought on by Mr. Tatham's request for some curriculum and some things of that nature. And I felt like being able to review those would have been beneficial, especially since we ended up with 3 or 4 or however many, we went into that to be able to review those for each one. I thought that those were beneficial and informational, and I would like any input from Mr. Martin as to any costs. I don't know if we have a cost associated with that. I don't know if we have.
No cost. We could certainly do that without issue.
Or if it will even cause you more frustration or work. That is not what I'm out for.
No.
But if it's easily done, I think that would be beneficial.
In terms of constructing minutes, it's easier if I record it because I go back and watch it.
Yeah.
My question would be, what would be the risk or the harms? Like, what would be the disadvantages
I
of?
think some people are maybe a little more open to speaking more freely, I guess, if they don't feel that they're being recorded at the time. But beyond that, it's an open meeting, so I think that would probably be the only potential drawback. Is some people may have hesitancy to maybe not to speak as openly as they would otherwise.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments? So it adds no cost, there's no more work, and it would be then streamed and recorded, just recorded, that's my question. What did you have in them?
My motion only asks for them to be recorded and made available for review in the same. Yeah. I'm not opposed, if anybody, I would only mind making the motion to amend, but the streaming is one way or the other as far as I'm concerned.
We're meeting all by doing what we're doing, so by doing recording doesn't change that.
Yeah, we can record it, so it's, I mean, like I said, to record it and make it available for review, I can also pick an option not to stream it, so if that's the will in terms of this motion and vote, we can do it that way.
I think it's fine to stream it, I mean, why not?
You guys tell
I
me.
move to amend the motion to add streaming.
I second that.
Okay, moved by Mr. Kisner, second by Mr. Tatham to amend it to add streaming and recording.
Well,
as one.
recording was in there, but we'll add streaming.
Add streaming.
I'm gonna take notes on this.
I'm
Fix it
sorry.
later. That's okay.
No, do I have to vote on it first?
We would vote on the amendment, pass it, and then the original
Vote to
motion. We'd vote them both yes to pass it all.
pass, okay. Just to clear my heads, it's been a long day.
Sorry.
That's okay, you have nothing.
I second his amendment. Or, no,
You made it.
I made
You
the motion, he
Mr.
seconded.
Mr. Tatham said. I've got that part.
I'm sorry.
If it was only that easy.
Yeah.
Okay, so, the original motion was Mr. Kisner was moving to record and make available for review information for work sessions like done for regular board meetings. That was, motion was made by Mr. Kisner, seconded by Mrs. Feathers. There was a motion to amend, to add to the original motion that the proceedings be streamed. And that was made by whom again? Kisner, and seconded by Tatum.
Put in front of you, sorry.
Okay. I'll have to fix that on the
That's
back
fine.
end.
Now, is this a voice vote?
Yes.
Since we
It's a
amended.
voice
The amendment
vote.
will be a voice vote, and it should be
It's a voice
electronic.
Yeah, I should be able to do the electronic one. I'll
Voice
just have
vote.
to go in and make some
Right.
modifications, but it's fine.
Okay, so now.
Which one are we voting on first?
The
You have to
amendment.
vote the amendment first.
We'll call for the vote on the amendment. Mr. Kisner?
Yes.
Mr. Tatham?
Yes.
Yes.
And yes. Now call for the vote on the original,
Yes.
There's no further discussion.
if no other discussion. Hearing none, call for the vote. Any other discussion?
Motion is open, or voting is open. Okay, motion passes 5-0, or 4-0, and 5.
Okay, moving on, educational leave.
Can I just ask a question of information here? How did you already, did Crest give that motion to you, Mr. Martin, already, or?
No, he was typing it when I made the motion.
Oh, you were typing, that's how you were able to get the computer vote?
Yeah.
Okay, I was just wondering how we did.
Yeah, he had identified that he'd like it as a voting matter at the last meeting, but I didn't have a motion in place, so I was waiting
Okay,
for.
so are we supposed to do that if we're gonna put up a motion? Are we supposed to say that in advance, or is
If
that
you
not
anticipate that
necessary?
it's a potential voting matter, yes, because I
Okay.
need to set it up as such.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, educational leave, entertain a motion to recommend the board approve the attached educational leave request. And there are two.
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Motion by Ms. Feathers, second by Mr. Tatham. Questions or comments? Discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Voting is open. Motion passes 4-0.
Okay, next concerns with screen times.
This agenda item was originally requested by Mr. Kisner, was followed up with a request by Mr. Tatham. I would advise that I'm currently seeking information on the ability for our iPad devices to adequately track. I have reached out to our state level contacts, Angela Miller and Jeff Webb with Apple. Thus far, they've indicated the individual device can track time. They have not indicated, though, that they can track time in mass using the Mosul management system. My concern is, I still have not been told by Apple if we can use the device, like, I'll use that, the iPad that we're recording our proceeding tonight. Okay, I looked at the screen time on it, and I can say that iPad sits in Darla's office on the charger 99% of the time. It's not being actively used. Yet when I looked at the time metric on that, it says it averages 4.5 hours of use per week. So I question a little bit in terms of how those metrics are being developed. I need more info from Apple. My concern would be, and again, this is my concern with the tech background is, are we tracking just use where the device is turned on and happens to be open to a particular website? Or is it actually able to track active student use where they're actively incorporating and using the device? I have not been supplied with that information from Apple, but I have made that inquiry. So at this juncture, I still don't feel that I've got adequate information. On the laptop side and talking with Paul, I think we're just really don't have a great option. I mean, GoGuardian can do some things, but it's not really gonna give you a good portrayal of, again, active
And
screen
it's the
time.
same thing, like if you have a web page opened up on there, it thinks it's active.
Yes.
There's no way of saying, all right, I know you've been on this page for 3 hours. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you've probably been inactive on it since it's never changed, but that means you have to sift through it. There's no quick way of saying how long you've actually been on the device.
And really what I would say with Apple, the Apple devices, we need to be able to do that via Mosul, where you could do that. Mosul is the management system for the iPad. If we can't track it in that manner, I mean, it's gonna be very time prohibitive to try to factor that in. So that's, right now, that's what we're seeking from Mr. Webb. I have not got, I mean, he just indicated they're still actively seeking to provide us information on that front. So, I mean, beyond that, that's the only thing I can bring to the discussion at this time.
Mr. Sines, I'm sorry, did I interrupt somebody?
Go ahead.
If the student is in a GoGuardian session, that time is tracked.
Yes.
When you were bringing up those history things. I know that if a student is in 2 sessions, that they get a combination of the 2 rules. But essentially, if every student's laptop was always considered to be in a session from the time school starts until the time school closes, we would have metrics on, again, if it's just open and has a screen. But that screen time, is assumably, right? I mean, we would have, would we have that ability to have those kind of metrics via that? Am I correct?
If you put them in a session all day long,
Right.
yes. You should have that metrics on it. But like even right now, if your screen goes to sleep, your computer goes to sleep, it still thinks you're on the web page.
Okay.
It doesn't understand.
So it's not, the session isn't just about whether the computer is actively in a user mode. If it's on standby or sleep, it
Now,
just
if
takes
it's
the
on standby
last.
or sleep, it turns it off. It knows it's not on.
Okay, but if your screen just
goes
turns
black,
off.
like you have a screensaver on
Right,
there, just turn
right.
it off, it still thinks you're active.
Do students have the ability to change the screen timeout, the
Yes.
standby timeout? That is
Yes.
not something that we override or control.
No.
That is a student preference.
I-
Could we control that if we wanted?
Yes, I can control that, but I'll let them on that just because
Right.
they know how long the device is on, make sure it's gonna last all day long, so they put battery saver mode, stuff like that onto
Okay.
it. I think they
Paul-
should have that ability.
And Paul, I noticed on the iPad, just when I was getting ready for the meeting tonight, if that device was in low power mode, it will not let you it wouldn't let you alter it past 2 minutes.
Right.
Once I took that low power mode off, then I was because my concerns while Mrs. Varner was trying to film there, it was kicking off every 2 minutes, which was not good. Like she'd have to watch it and move the thing.
And we have issues with the laptops too. If they drop below 5% on battery, it really limits what you can do.
Right.
And it tries to save it right there and just put it in hibernation, so that way it still keeps any information she might have open. So when you actually charge it, it brings it right back up where you're at.
So, I kind of feel like we're chasing our tail with trying to track screen time. Because what teacher is gonna say, okay, everybody log out, turn your computers off, we're gonna have live session now. All right, everybody log back in, we're gonna, you know what I mean? Like, that is a complete waste of time. I think what we need in place is, we need, reassured that our teachers are closing the laptop and giving live presentation. So I think we just need to make sure those measures are taking place instead of trying to measure it on.
I think the best way to do that is through administrative evaluation
Yeah.
and building, which I think when this was originally brought up, that was.
That's Mr. Martin's original statement,
Yes.
which I agree with. I don't want to make a rule we can't enforce, but I do want to give my only, I guess my rebuttal to my only concern with Mr. Martin's proposal is, in general, administrative review of a classroom is twice a year. Like there's administrative.
It has to be more frequent than that. The volume that they'd have to be in the classroom depends upon the teacher's level of experience.
But if they have-
If they're in the
Okay.
initial, like there's number of years of service required. But, I mean,
So what's the
administrators
newest
also.
teacher's normal number of visits by an administrator for review?
Mr. Barr, help me on this, the eval, they've got to do 2 formal evaluations, which requires, I think, 4 formal observations per semester, so eight times on those
8 times a
teachers.
year.
But that does also discounts, I mean, we have teachers using, or we have principals using a walkthrough tool, using WeClimb, for example, that they're pulling data as well, so I would certainly hope they're in there far more frequently than that.
I mean, I'm looking for something to give reassurance to parents that are concerned. So I am open to that input, and I appreciate your comment about being administrator. Again, I don't want to put a rule we can't place, which is why I asked for the screen time metrics,
but I
is
don't think
because
it's-
I'm wanting something that we can give reassurance, not just saying trust us, but
Yeah.
here is something we give. But
I think if Apple can give us a systematic way to do it.
Right, right.
That's valid.
Right.
I'm open to that, but I mean, they've got to be able to tell us, is there a way that we can ascertain that information efficiently?
Yeah,
I mean, that's.
I agree with that.
I don't think it should be
We
a
cannot
cost
go to each
prohibitive
individual
measure.
device. It is not
Right.
feasible to take that data, even if it's
But
available.
that's what
now.
that's what they're looking
Yeah,
at right now,
yes,
is
yeah.
that,
That is
are they
com-
able to do that?
That is completely unfeasible and
So
useless
their-
for what we're discussing.
And
Just for the record, I'm in full
Their
support of
textbooks
that.
are on the computer, so they pull their textbook up, they set this aside, and they actually have a piece of paper and a pencil in their hand, and they're engaging with the teacher. I mean, it's.
Right.
A lot of times that work is concurrent, I mean, their device is on, but they're still
That's what I'm
interacting with the
saying,
teacher.
yeah.
I mean,
I don't know how you can blanket and say you can only have your computer on, you
It's
know.
tough, I mean, it's a
Yeah.
tough one.
Listen, I don't know many desks that you could be out doing paperwork and have your computer there that I have seen. I mean, like, that usability is pretty limited to have both paper and the laptop at a simultaneous time. So I think that's probably more limited than we realize, just out of feasibility and space. But with that said, at this point in time, until we hear other data, until we hear the rest of the answer there, or if we find something else out on the computer or something of that nature, the biggest thing I'd say is I would like to personally encourage that in these administrative reviews, we have something where that is something that's actively being watched by administration. Like, you know what I'm saying, giving this something, so it's an active participation in saying, are we using technology too much, or if that's what we can do for now from an administrative standpoint, I think we should make sure that we're being proactive.
I think in talking with our administrators, just through their observations, through their walkthroughs, if they're repetitively seeing a classroom where all kids are doing is pecking away at the computer on their iPads and there's little limited interaction, then I think that needs to be brought up to the individual educator. Yeah.
As long as that's a metric, that would be my last thing until we get a conclusion on these other things. But thank you for your efforts.
Okay, thank you,
I
sir.
do appreciate that, and I do not expect us to do anything unfeasible. I don't want to be unreasonable, and I hope nobody views me that way.
No, I think right now, we just need to see if Apple can
Right.
supply us with a manner to do this
Right.
that's gonna work in mass.
Okay, anything else on that?
Yes, I want to add something to it. I approach this from a totally different angle. It doesn't really matter to me of getting the time that the device says that we're on it. I think we can look at it, especially by grade level, from kindergarten to second grade. I would ask from Mr. Martin is what would be your professional recommendation would be the max amount of time that a student should be on a device in a day. And I think you probably would go to pediatricians and other medical people for recommendations for that. But I approach it from kindergarten, first and second grade, when we're trying to, especially if we read our goals of what our Preston County school system of making a connection with students, and from our teachers here, if we have 3 vital connections with a student, that connection is going to be between a human and a student, but not a human via a computer screen or a device screen. So I think for the youngest of ages, we could almost start off with, as a board saying, max amount of time that's used, the device is used, and we give a cap to it with input from teachers and building administrators, because kids should be learning how to read from a book and writing with a pencil, because they probably should not have a whole lot of screen time at that age, from what I've heard from our doctor. And so if you're using it for everything at 1-to-1, then I think we're outside of our max before that child even goes home and most likely gets on a device again.
Well, Ms. Tatum, I would say if we were to walk into a typical classroom, I don't know that that's accurate. I mean, I don't want to give the perception, and Kim, you were a former kindergarten teacher. I mean, did you feel as if that they spend an excessive amount of time on devices in your classroom? or-
Not at all.
What year was that?
Not at all. Oh, yeah.
I'm
No,
saying,
no, it's okay. 2021.
So last year?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah,
Two.
not the year before,
Okay.
the spring of 2020,
And
yeah.
the reason I say this is that what sparked this for me to get it back on the agenda is I've watched training videos that have been put out by the county from our coaches where it was going to, I think, 2nd or 3rd grade for reading and writing, and in the video there was a comment made, and of course if you want to use pencil and paper to write, then you can.
Right.
Implying that you didn't have to use pencil and paper to write. And so if we're not going to teach writing in 1st and 2nd grade with a pencil and paper because you can do it all online, I think we're setting a child up for a lifetime of failure of not knowing how to read and write.
The mistake, I don't know that that's accurate. I think if we go out in typical classrooms, you're not gonna see that that's widely utilized.
Well,
I think we have plenty of classrooms where kids are using paper and pencil
Okay.
at K-2. I mean, I think what we need to continue to reinforce is this is a tool. It's not the start all end all of all instruction. And I think the vast majority of our teachers, believe that, particularly at those levels.
And we're getting that.
I'm sitting here nodding because I teach 4th grade, and people would be shocked at how little screen time we actually use in the 4th grade classroom. And we use it for iReady components, sometimes for some RCD things, definitely for some assessment pieces, maybe a station that's 15 minutes long. It's not something where they're glued to their computers all day long at all.
How much time do you think that a 4th grader would use it in Brewston School, a device?
Well, I'm gonna base it on mine, because I'm not standing in the other 4th grade classrooms, and I'd hate to speak for somebody else. But my kids might be on the computer for 30, maybe 35 minutes in an entire day.
And do you think the other teachers are similar to that, or?
I don't think that they're on their computers a ton. Sometimes when we're doing some of the RCD components, those are online components. But sometimes there'll be a station activity, but
Right.
realistically speaking, you've got about between 15 and 25 minutes in any given day on an iReady session, and then you may have a station activity that has some computer time. Really beyond that, possibly some word processing if they're trying to put together a PowerPoint presentation or something, but no, not a lot of computer time online. Most of it is spent in front of actual real materials, books, paper, pencils. The majority of the time in my class it's writing. The majority of it's manual.
Yeah, so if we had some way to assess to see if that is the norm, then that would be great. That would make me feel a lot more comfortable.
But I
It
think
is a tool.
I think we do
It's a tool.
with what Mr. Martin is saying. I'm looking at Mr. Notch here in my eyesight, which means it looks like I'm staring at you all the time. But as an administrator, he does have that tool. So if he's walking in and seeing, I'm gonna use myself, he walks into my classroom, and he's been in my classroom 5 times, and every time that he's been in there, I'm doing the same type of thing on a computer, that's gonna be a red flag for him to go and talk to that teacher and say, this has to change. Am I correct, sir?
Yeah, that's gonna be a huge red flag. That's gonna lead to some closer scrutiny of whether it be lesson plans, some closer scrutiny for maybe a formal observation. It's gonna last longer than just a 15-minute walkthrough where you're spending an hour more in the classroom. I can tell you firsthand, I spent some time today actually in a kindergarten classroom with Ms. Price, and they had their iReady station was about 15 minutes. That was one of their 4 guided reading stations, one of their 5 guided reading stations. The other ones were hands-on activities or things where they were in a small group with the teacher doing their phonics lesson, their NIHouse lesson, or with the aide doing an enrichment lesson to their phonics lesson. So, in a given day, I would say probably, and that's very similar to what you see in a lot of your K-2 classes, is that they use it for the iReady station as part of their guided reading. They may use it for a guided math lesson as well, but you're not seeing like kids being told, here's your iPad, go in the corner, learn. The classroom teacher instruction dynamic is still the most important thing that's going on, and that is what seeing in the classrooms. At least that's what I'm seeing when I go into classrooms, is that the teachers are there, they are teaching, they are working with, whether it be small groups, whether it be whole group, and the tablet is just a tool that is a station tool, or it is something to bring in supplementary materials for. It's not the basis of instruction.
And just to give you an example, today, my kids were literally on theirs for 38 minutes, and it was for the after-test bowl done for a whole county together collectively. That was it. We didn't go on them again beyond that because I figured we were already going to be on them at that time. It wasn't necessary to do it in any other way today.
So you have paper elements for all of your curriculum then?
Yeah, we do have the option for paper elements for all of our curriculum. Even the RCD components that are online, the assessments themselves are online, but the materials that we have that we can use, the majority of them are materials in our repertoire or an occasional article or something that's online, but then they have to do something on paper to process that. Occasional seesaw assignment, that might be an online piece, but my kids have done maybe 6 seesaw assignments the entire year so far. So just to kind of give you an idea, and it's, I think that's fairly normal in most of the classrooms. You might have some a little bit heavier with some of the current event type titles and articles and such, because those pieces, we can't always print them. And then it becomes a copy cost issue too, because it's counterproductive to print off an article for, you know, a mass group of students when they're using it for a 15-minute period of time. So you have them read from the article that's online, but then you're having them process pieces on paper too. And most teachers are doing it that way that I've seen anyways.
Yeah, I'm just having a hard time in my head figuring out, like, one hand when we talk about curriculum in the work sessions, I'm hearing that these subjects don't have consumables and it's all an e-textbook. And they only have a small amount of copies, so therefore they're not printing. So they're getting their source material from the laptop because it's not printed and they can't copy it. But then I'm hearing that they're not really on these devices.
I do hear what you're saying.
So it's hard for me that those two don't match up together.
Like for ELA, we've got our book room down there, and I'm not sure if you got to see that before everything. We've got an extensive book room down there. We've got supplies that are in our classroom. The students do have a reading book, ELA reading book. They do have a math book, consumable math book that has all their lessons and everything in it as well. And those are the 2 core curriculums. Now the science and social studies, those would be supplemented with some pieces as well. Usually articles or the teachers doing hands-on activities to engage them in that, involving writing into it as well.
But they don't have a science or social studies textbook?
It depends on what classroom you go into, and I know that sounds strange, but we're in the process of adopting a new science curriculum, and everything's changing over to next-gen science standards, which is, I believe, 50% hands-on components. So that's what we are gearing towards, where everything is, 50% of the science curriculum is hands-on. So you do have to pull some online resources to be able to use to teach those components and pieces. But you're teaching the Common Core standards, so a teacher typically will research what those Common Core standards are, pull out pieces of information that they might be able to use, whether it be an article or a science experiment or a STEM activity or whatever, to teach the children that specific standard that goes along with it. We do have social studies books, but they are outdated, there's no doubt about it. So I don't know any teacher that uses the social studies book we have and says, yep, that's the end-all be-all. Nope, you're gonna pull 10 other resources to supplement that resource as well. But that's pretty typical throughout. And, if you'd like to come into the classroom, I would more than welcome you coming into the classroom, sit down and I can show you the curriculum that I'm talking about. I'd be more than happy to do that.
Okay. You're 4th grade. What is 4th grade social studies?
What do you mean, what is?
Like, what years of history does that cover?
Well, we're going through a lot of West Virginia. It's a lot of state. And then a lot of local history. That's pretty much the focus on what we do as far as that.
We update curriculum every 6 years.
We're not
subject
doing like
text,
ancient
correct?
civilizations and those kinds of things. That comes later.
Yes, every 6 years.
Settlement
6 years, not a lot
patterns.
of updates to social studies to be outdated, right? I mean, West Virginia
I'm sorry.
history, I was simply saying, you were saying that our textbooks were outdated, and I was saying, we replace the textbook every 6 years. West Virginia history would not be that outdated over a 6-year period, right?
No, it's,
Yes, it is.
the certain pieces of it, yes. But in addition to that, we also study like the settlement patterns, colonization and those kinds of things. All of that is studied as well. Now, those kinds of things don't change.
Right.
But there's pieces of resources that maybe are outdated in how the text is printed, those kinds of things. So when it comes to our social studies, we have an active book for the kids, and it's a consumables book that we use with the children, but then we supplement it with other pieces as well, so it's stronger. That's all. That's what I mean by that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, sure.
Moving on, 90-10 grading practice follow-up.
I requested that to be put on the agenda for 2 reasons. The first reason was I was given a copy of the Preston High School staff meeting minutes from September 13th and 15th. And I asked Mr. Martin to upload this, and I think you guys have it there as a link. I was concerned about the 3rd sentence of the meeting minutes, where it says the direction the district is heading is grade solely on summative assessments. The previous 2 sentences say a curriculum action team will help determine grading policies, and you're not required to use the 90-10-0. I'm not sure what the 0 is. But then again, the 3rd sentence, the direction the district is heading is grade solely on summative assessments. Of course, it raised red flags for me for 2 reasons. We voted, or we recognized as a board that we had the authority to determine if a 90-10 practice was going to be used. The 10 would be for formative, which would be homework, and we said that we were not going to require that. So my question to Mr. Martin is who is talking for the board saying that the district is heading towards grading solely, which would be 100% /0 grading practice, because the board has not discussed that and we did not agree upon that. So it's just more of it's not an action matter, it's just a matter of pointing out again that I feel like somebody is getting ahead of the board making policies. The second reason I asked for this item to be put on the agenda is in the same faculty meeting, different policy was sent out to the members, and on that second bullet point that it was sent out, and I think this is also uploaded for you guys under R8-1-2, which is code employer-employee relations. The second bullet point says, employees of boards of education share the responsibility for implementing the policies and practices, that would be the key word, approved by boards of education, and they have certain rights and responsibilities as provided in statute, contract, or an accepted practice. So I wanted to establish that the Board of Education does have authority over grading practices because we have the authority over both policies and practices, which I think that was a matter of discussion that Mr. Kisner and I were talking about. The previous one is the 90-10, does the board have to approve that? And because it was said that that was a practice and not a policy, and I wanted to make sure we understand that we have authority over both policy and practices.
If I may just to clarify, I agree we have all that authority. My only stipulation in the prior meeting was there was no policy being broken because the policy at hand did not address grading practices, it addressed curriculum. But I completely agree with your summation of that, yes, we would have complete.
And Mr. Tatum, in response, I mean, I followed up with Mr. Seymour in regards to this, and at this juncture, I've talked to him and I will talk to other administrators. I don't think it's appropriate to indicate that the entirety of the county is going in any absolute particular direction at this point in time. You know, based upon the recent proceedings, as we would, as a district and as individual schools, we would work through those curricular processes through the available policies we discussed last time.
Okay, moving on, grading scale for grade 5. And this is listed action, discussion, information.
The agenda item was requested by Mr. Tatham. Attached a copy of the current policy related to grading scale used for fifth grade students. Based upon this, there's at this time, there is a disconnect between our current practice and as it relates to our current policy. I've attached notices, and I would say this, in looking at this situation, and I conferred with our policy expert, Dr. Rozier, I think there's no question that this was a curriculum matter that was administratively changed without board authorization. I don't think there's any questioning that. There was not a board action taken on to adjust the policy as it relates to grading practices in K through 4 to include grade 5. The recommendation or advice I received from Dr. Rozier, it was in this instance to provide the board with a memo indicating as such that we are recognizing that this was a change that was made administratively and without board approval. Requesting that the board consider adjustment of our existing policy to align with our practice. The other information that was provided was simply informational nature to demonstrate that while the board had not taken formal action on the matter, that there was training sessions that had been provided in advance of this situation. This practice has been in place through the 21-22 school year and is currently in place. But again, it is certainly recognized that we currently have a situation where, again, our practice by standards-based reporting in the 5th grade does not align with our current policy. So, I'll open that up for other discussion amongst the board, Mr. Hudgens.
So the reason I brought this to Mr. Martin's attention is that, as he said, it violates policy. I'm not going to beat that dead horse, but I found it whenever I was reviewing our work sessions where the report cards were given. I think you guys will all remember this report card, that if we did have the work sessions recorded, we could probably go back and there was probably a 1-hour discussion on this report card. And this report card that was supplied by the county was for 5th grade with it. And so, as Mr. Martin said, this is out of policy. That policy that puts it for K through 4 to be standards-based grades was last revised in March of 2021. The email notifying teachers that 5th grade grading was going to change to standards-based grading was sent out in May of 2021. So 2 months after you guys last revised this policy, it was administratively updated to change it. So I have several problems with it beyond being outside of policy. My first main issue with it is, and I've gone back through and read the policies, standard-based grading, which I'm gonna call mastery learning to simplify it down, was put into policy, I think, starting in 2016 for K through 3rd grade maybe, and then 4th grade was added for the 2017 school year. So we are now 5 school years past the last time the board looked at mastery learning. If we all, what I'm slowly figuring out, that you have mastery learning, which is in our current policy to be kindergarten through 4th grade, and then you'd have the traditional system, which would be an A, B, C, D scale that by policy goes from 5th grade to 12th grade. So the A, B, C, D scale we'll call the traditional scale, and we'll call the other one mastery. From my understanding of mastery learning, it's a concept, it's a theory that's new. In essence, that theory is based on the fact that if you put enough time with a student and teaching a student, that any student and every student can learn anything possible. And I agree that that may be a wonderful theory to have for younger grades. So if we're talking about, as the policy says, that kindergarten through 4th grade, when you're teaching students how to read, how to do math, introduction to social studies, introduction to science, introduction to music, etc., that giving that student the opportunity to teach them and then assess them, find out what they're having problems, and then pull that student and give them more time and more attention to remediate them and teach them the standards makes a lot of sense. But I think as a board, we have to ask ourselves, is there unlimited resources in Preston County school system that in the 5th grade, and then I'm gonna skip 6th, 7th, and 8th, But 9th, 10th, and 11th, 12th, because we just saw 2 weeks ago where we were trying to implement a mastery learning grading scheme through 90-10, and 2 years before that, it came to the board's attention that they tried to implement mastery learning at the high school level, that it's becoming clear that we're trying to transition mastery learning throughout all of Preston County schools, either directly or indirectly by doing it, even if it's out of policy, than saying, hey, we've been doing it for a year, we can't change now. So, to reiterate, if we're going to do mastery learning, we need to fund it. Because to do mastery learning, that means that if a student does not meet the standards, so if you have an 8th grade student that is not meeting 8th grade standards, the teacher has to have the ability to pull that student aside and give them the remediation that they need to meet 8th grade standards. And if you're having to do that for 30 students, how is that possible without additional aides or without smaller classes? I can understand how in the kindergarten, 1st, 2nd grade level, when maybe you only have 20 or 22 students in a class, that's easier with simpler concepts. So that would be my first question is how do we have the resources to truly implement mastery learning? And if we're going to have a grading scale that's grading them on mastery learning, then that means we're implementing it. That would be the first question, is how do we have the resources? My second comment would be, if we're going to implement mastery learning and standard-based grading for 5th grade, why aren't we fully doing it? We've been doing it for a year. We spent an hour looking at this report card. The first comment would be, this is only part of the report card. Because there was a second part of the report card that listed grades for wellness, music, and the other parts that used an ABCD schedule. So we had 2 report cards actually being used for 5th grade. The second part of my comment would be, 2 pages of this report card is used for English and math, and it goes through all the different standards. But for science and social studies, that also have multiple standards, we're not grading on that.
They're assessed in satisfactory, unsatisfactory, and in this instance, social studies and science can be integrated into math and reading instruction.
First of all, that's a second question that I'm actually putting on the agenda for next week. But science and social studies have objectives by the state, correct? Why aren't we giving the parents information on that? In essence, what I'm saying is, if all of the arguments that would go towards having a standard-based grade report, so that parents can fully understand where their student is doing well and where they're not doing as well, which is the whole reason, the justification of doing a report card. Why aren't we doing that for science, social studies, wellness, and whatever the other classes would be, music, art, etc. In essence, standards-based grading sounds wonderful. And in a perfect world with unlimited resources, it would probably produce incredible students. But then we have to fund our classrooms and our teachers that the teachers can actually excel according to that level. And then we would have to actually do it. So you'd be talking a 4-page report card. So to end my part of it with, I did think it was very funny and ironic that we spent an hour in a work session discussing this report card and how confusing it was and how I gave my impression of it. And then Ms. Feathers had a totally different impression of it. And in that work session, we asked if this information could be a supplement and we still use the ABCD schedule for grades. And we were told no, and we're not going backwards. But they weren't even in policy, following the policy. Because the policy says for 5th grade we do ABCD.
I think the policy says it's just mastery satisfactory, if I recall.
For K through 4, but not for
No, for 5, I think it's
That's
mastery. I
not-
don't think they have, I think ABCD is only the high school, isn't it, Mr.
That
Mayor?
is
No,
not
it-
true.
At this time,
Okay,
5 through 8, that's what I said. I mean, at this point, the grade span is not covered by the current policy. It is not.
Page 160 of the policy
Well,
manual.
Mr. Tate, I think I've clarified.
I know, I was
This
clarifying for
is-
Mr.
yeah,
Pisner.
This grade 5 is not inclusive in this.
I do think that for any discussion, I don't want to completely blame the presentation, but I do feel like the presentation insinuated that our report card is attached to our learning, which is attached to the standards-based grading. And those are what I tried to articulate in that open meeting. Standards-based teaching is completely separate from how we grade report and our grading policies such as the 90-10. These are really three different realms that they are completely independent. We can go with the 90-10 and 80-20 and completely up to the teacher. That doesn't change whether or not we do standard-based teaching or teaching based on the standards, which is what we have always done. The education system has done forever. Whether teachers were aware of the standards, as she said she wasn't, or I mean, as one has said that they haven't or not, that is what the teaching has always been based on, is the standards. A grading policy such as 90-10, 80-20, or a teacher's preference is a separate subject matter, and a grading reporting policy from our nature of the ABCDF and the I don't even know what we call this 1, 2, 3, 4. It's some kind of a mastery proposal. I don't know what the title is of the one that you're using as the example. I think those are all three separate discussion points because all three of them are independent.
One thing I will say is as you review our policy, and particularly the curriculum, and you look at the breakdowns in terms of how we break our programmatic levels down. I mean, I'm looking here, our early learning programs are grades pre-K through 5. And this is one thing that we reviewed as well. Our middle school program is identified as grades 6 through 8, and our high school is graded through 9 through 12. Now again, there is no disagreement that our current policy does not align with our practice, but it feels as if the current practice is more aligned with the grade structure which is specified within our policies. I mean, as I'm looking at this, our early learning in elementary, again, is structured with early and elementary learning primary grades 1 through 2 and early and elementary learning intermediate grades 3 through 5. Again, not arguing that our practice doesn't align with our policies, but our practice is more aligned with the grade structure that we have defined within policies. Now, I would leave it at that.
Mr. Tatum, what was the page in the policy manual that you were referencing?
160.
Thank you.
And probably hindsight, because that went through and I was on the board, I didn't see it to catch. And so I'm gonna say that. The one part I think we have done and included in Mr. Martin's goals, and I think I can say that publicly, includes making sure we follow policy. On tonight's agenda, that's what he has proposed.
Yes.
By proposing is to make sure that our policy is being followed. So this is a way of also, this is what we told him, one of the things we wanted him to do
Yes.
was to meet goals, and that's by coming forward tonight with his discussion, because it hasn't been a proposal yet, as his discussion was to ensure that he's doing what we instructed him to do. So I think that's important to be said.
And I appreciate that. I do think that the way that it is, the current proposal is that we change the policy to align with the practice. I think what my personal position would be, we should align the practice with the policy. I don't think there's anything wrong with the policy. For full disclosure, at Ms. Moyer's request at the work session and her statement was, it's too late to change it now, give us this chance for this year. And at that point in time, I did point out that it had been since 2017 as well. Like this wasn't, and they said that this was the first year with this specific software or whatever. I forget what it was. But with that said, unless there is a major change in parental support, I very much personally will push next year, or before next year, before we're into it, so we have plans to implement, for us to go back to an ABCDF grading reporting system. With 5th grade already supposed to being on that, I think that personally, again, where I stand on things it would be detrimental for us to spend another year not doing that if other board members think, yeah, we're probably headed back in that direction too. I'm one of 5. But the current feedback from parents and teachers is not that the way that we're reporting is not, from my position, needs to be corrected to something that is usable by parents with the information that we're doing as supplemental. Some of the feedback I got from teachers was that currently, for instance, Central Preston is 5 through 8. So while we may lay out our grades K through 5, 6 through 8, 9 through 12, being the grades that are together makes more sense for consistent grading, for the children to understand and for everybody in the building to be on the same page again. And I would like to see the A, B, C, D, F across the board, just because, again, I think that gives consistency, and I think people understand that. And that, to me, is one of the most important aspects of our report card. Again, I'm not pushing to change that at this time, but it would make me hesitant to adapt our policy to meet a practice that was put into place a year or 2 ago that shouldn't have been.
One comment I would follow up with from the classroom teacher part. It is, they have survived a great amount of workload. Now, the one thing, Mr. Kisner, if we would do this, which would get us in line for now, and also, again, I want to use fulfill his, that is something that can be put on an agenda to be looked at to be changed for next year.
Right.
So this year is what we're trying to do is to get into, what's the right word?
Compliance.
Compliance, that was what I was trying to, it just left me. We're trying to get into compliance. So if we can become compliant this year, it gives time, and again, you as a board member can bring in a recommendation.
Right.
But again, we're looking at the policies of teachers and doing it the right way.
Yeah. Now, the teachers that I got feedback from had indicated that, again, they didn't. I was expecting some feedback from teachers saying, well, it would be cumbersome if I have to change to an ABDCF right now, or if I have to change to a 1, 2, 3, 4 thing right now. I got none of that. The biggest consistent feedback I got was, if you foresee an ABDCF in the future, change it now. Which we wouldn't actually be making a change to put them in that. We would simply be leaving the policy as is, and our practice would need to align with our policy. So again, I'm just sharing that as feedback from the teachers that were able to get me feedback.
Why aren't all the subjects being graded in the same fashion? Why isn't science and social studies, etc., graded with all of the objectives so that parents have that information? Are those classes not important?
No, Mr. Tatum, it's not that they're important, but I would say that the amount of instructional time devoted, there's far more instructional time that's devoted to math and reading language arts, and that's our primary, what we're being assessed upon.
But I asked the same question then, just because that's the primary part of the time being spent, is science and social studies not important?
Mr. Tatum, I was a social studies teacher, so I find social studies to be important. Again, social studies is being integrated, for example, in the reading language arts. Aspects of your reading language arts, I'm sure, will be, for example, drawn from historical text and so forth, where aspects of social sciences can be integrated as such. But no, our current grading report does not go into the level of detail for science and social studies as it does in reading language arts or math.
Well, I guess maybe I can rephrase Mr. Tate's question. Was there an intentional decision to not give a standards-based reporting for those subjects? Or is that just, we moved into these other ones first because they're what we're graded on by the state? And again, that's just what I'm asking.
I think the reporting implement was designed to assess your two primary curricular areas that are being assessed, reading and math.
Yeah.
Again, from the direction we see at the State Department, the emphasis is being placed on reading, math, and writing. Again, not dispelling, as a former social studies teacher, I would say not that social studies is not important, but in terms of the level of emphasis, that's just not where the level of emphasis is not falling in those two particular content areas.
Your perspective is that the state says that those are more important because that's what they're assessing? Is that a correct summation? I think that's the message I would hear from the state. These are the 3 areas that we are assessing.
Yeah, I think you all were awarded the presentation by our state board president, Mr. Hardesty.
Yeah, we were told that, reading, writing, and arithmetic, they were going back.
Well, I took back, yeah, I took that to mean all subject matter, outside of everything, but yes, I agree with what you're saying.
But I mean, elements of writing can be taught teaching social science topics. If I want a kid to write an essay
Right.
related to, an historical text,
Right.
you can certainly incorporate it as such.
Okay, so, here we are. Do we have Mr. Martin, I don't know if you have an actual motion on this.
In terms of the memo that was availed, Mr. Huggins, it says, it's come to my attention that beginning the 21-22 school term, the standards-based grading reports for grades K-4 was administratively updated to include grade 5 without going through the process of having the board formally approve this policy change. The main purpose of this memo is to recommend that the board formally approve the attached policy R3-22-7 grading policy and grading scale for grades K-5 during the 9/26 or 10/10/22 board meeting in order that the policy manual will be accurately portray the grading practices for grades K through 5. With Mr. Ziegray not in attendance tonight, I was not sure that the board would want to take this up
I'm
without
not
full
prepared to vote on this.
membership.
I'm not prepared to vote on this tonight anyway, so
Okay.
I move that we move it to the next meeting.
Before we move on, Mr. Martin, can I ask, if I may ask,
Mhm.
and if you'd rather address it at the next meeting, but is there a particular reason why your recommendation is that we should change policy to align with practice as opposed to the practice should be aligned with policy? You understand what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, I understand, Mr. Kisner. In this instance, I see that we've had an existing practice, again,
Right.
not a board-approved
Right.
practice, that's been in place for the entirety of the 21-22 school year, and we are sitting in nearly October, and it's been incorporated.
Yeah.
To me, the best interest of students and teachers is to, again, align our practice with, or align our policy with our current practice. Decisions in terms of making changes as they relate to grading, grading practices typically is not an effective time to do this when we're nearly halfway through the 10 weeks of this juncture. That's my opinion at this point.
feasibility on teachers essentially.
And again, if the board is inclined, if this board is inclined to make changes of that nature, again, these timelines, I talk about in terms of involving teachers and preparing them and so forth. To enact this at this juncture, to me is we're ripping a practice that they've been working under over the last year and saying, now do it this way.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm coming from with this. I do not feel it's an appropriate time to change this practice.
Had this been a practice that started at the beginning of the year, it would be different. However, we cannot be a board that makes it's not okay to change your policy to go with what you're doing, regardless. We cannot be that board.
That's what they're proposing.
Yeah, so that's why I said I'm not ready to vote on this, because I agree that it's best that we stay in the practice because of how long they've done it, how much, they've done their curriculum, their, planning, how dare us, like, put one more thing on them, let's just let them get through it, but at the same time, changing the policy, that's not cool either.
But to some extent, I would understand the plight of the teachers. I mean, if the majority of the teachers say this would be way too much work for us to have to change now that we've done it for a year this way and we're set up that way, I agree with you in general.
Yeah.
Wherever the policy came from an administrative perspective, definitely needs addressed to make sure that doesn't happen.
Absolutely.
But I do feel for the teachers. I mean, like, I do think that I think it's fantastic if we move it to the next meeting, which I apologize, that was where your motion was going. But I do think that would be great because I personally would like some more feedback from teachers in making that decision. I mean, that to me are the stakeholders that matter in this decision as much as anything.
Okay, so we'll leave it on the next agenda and moving on. Parental notification,
Do we have to
Mr.
vote to
Kids.
table that, since it said it could be an action?
Well, wait a minute, let me go back in. It says action, discussion, information.
But no action was taken on that.
Do we have to do a motion? There's a motion. Miss Feathers made a motion to move it to next meeting. Let's do that. So we make it right.
Second.
Moved by Miss Feathers, second by Mr. Kisner. Any discussion or question? Let Mr. Martin have a chance to type, and then we'll call for the vote. Make sure you get it right.
Table the matter?
Yeah, table.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever the next board meeting is. I think that's right, 10/10, because Monday's the third. Yeah. Yes, sir. call for the vote? I'm sorry.
That motion is made by Ms. Feather, second by Mr. Kisner,
Correct.
Voting is open.
Okay, next one.
The motion passes 4-0.
I apologize. Susan.
All right.
Next on the agenda, parental notification related non-curricular removal from class. Mr. Kisner and Mr. Martin.
Yeah, this issue was requested to be placed on the agenda by Mr. Kisner. He wants to discuss parental notification requirements in instances in which students are being removed from class for non-curricular matters.
So I would like, this is being brought up as a proactive thought that I have had. There is no direct, formal, any one instance that I'm looking for addressed. I think there was some confusion last board meeting when I brought it up as what we needed to discuss. But there are parental concerns about kids that are leaving the classroom for even, let's use the example of going to school counselors for discussion, and they are missing curriculum time for that. I think that is service that the school has been required to provide, and that we do provide, but I think that it would be beneficial for parents if they proactively were given on some schedule, whether that be with report cards or on a monthly or weekly basis, some notification of the amount of time that children are leaving the educational environment for regular curriculum for alternative discussions. Or for alternative reasons, whatever those are. I just think that will give parents some peace of mind about, again, they're sending their kids to the classroom for education. So I am starting the discussion point of, maybe we started out with asking Mr. Martin if there is a way that you see that someplace this fits, that we already have in place, or if this is going to take an exorbitant amount of resources in some manner. I would think there are limited people within the school system that a child can be pulled from a classroom. I don't think that an IEP is taking away, right? Those are intended for education, so I don't think that's an aspect of this. But do we have the ability to go ahead and or to put things, or is there already some place that this fits that we could start this process?
I think this could be, again, I don't know that it necessarily requires a formal policy. This is more so that it can be handled through an administrative directive to
Okay.
say, I think we would need to define the situations which are appropriate for parental contact to be made. Counseling session, I would assume in those instances, a counselor is communicating with the parent if they're pulling the child out with regularity. I think the one thing we would need to hone in on as a board is that, what circumstances do we find necessary to make those notifications? I understand from what you're saying is that a child being pulled out for educational services, say for example, related to your IEP, that's not what we're looking for. It's things outside of the norm.
And for some reason I think this sounds familiar, and there's something somewhere that like limits what classes they can come out. I might have dreamt that. Is there something in code or?
Not so much in code.
No?
I mean, I can review it just in policy to see if there's anything in line with this. I don't, off the top of my head, I don't know that there is, but I mean, I'm certainly.
So you can look at it, talk to the principals.
And if you think that this is something from an administration standpoint that we just, that it's an unofficial, just administrative policy or procedure, I don't know. I don't want to cause more confusion with that policy discussion, but I'm open to that. But that is the start of the discussion is, again, giving parents faith that their child is in the school, that they are in an educational environment, and not being pulled out for other things proactively.
Is there any other feedback?
Anything else?
Thank you for your consideration.
Okay, moving on then. Budget journal entries, 110 through 113. Record, which includes, it's the budget sources, the homeless donation, technology fees, ag registration fees, student testing rewards.
So I have no attachment on this. And I had an email, and I'm sorry, Mr. Martin, but in my sleepiness last night,
Written in.
I didn't, I had an email to you saying, hey, there's no attachment on this, nor is there on the first scheduled checks items B, and I did not send it somehow, and I apologize. So I don't know if those are items that we need to wait on, or if there was intentionally not something
I
attached.
don't know if those were just empty, when they created the field and didn't put content
Because
into
in our
it.
last board meeting, homeless donations was part of the journal entries.
I would, honestly, I would venture to say that sometimes it's pretty easy to create an additional item. They may have created two sections of checks, but they've only inputted content on section C. In terms of the budget entries, those are typically updated to our finance department.
So I don't think we have anything to approve, Mr. Huggins.
Nothing to approve on items A and B, we're looking strictly at item C, Mr. Huggins.
Okay, so,
While we're on A, since it's on the
Oh.
agenda, I think at a previous meeting, Mr. Martin, I asked if they could write a description on the bottom of the journal entry so that we understood what they were for. That wasn't done at the last meeting. Are we gonna be able to do that?
I mean, I reached out to, and I believe that Mrs. Kerstetter provided any response to your inquiry about that, Mr. Statham?
My communication was through you. I never talked to her directly about it.
Okay.
She never got to me about it.
Okay,
That's
I
what
was,
you're
I
asking.
thought there some communications have been afforded there. I'll go back through and I'll get you some information on that.
Does it matter that, item A and B both are listed as action type?
yeah, that's why I did what I did. Because A has recommend to approve the budget journals. You can just leave those alone.
Essentially, you're saying we can just skip them, right? Because
There's no content to
Yeah.
be
So,
approved.
so we're allowed to, it's just automatically put on there. if
I'll
there
just put
was-
no actions taken due to content not
Okay.
provided.
Okay, next is scheduling checks. Same thing with B. So you're going with, okay. C is, entertain a motion to approve the schedule of checks.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Feathers, second by Mr. Tatum. Any questions?
Mr. Martin, there's a check to Career Safe LLC for $16,147. The description says library license. Do you happen to know what that is? Oh,
I don't, but I can
Is that
certainly
the
find out.
Okay.
program that the library uses?
Honestly, I'm not certain, Mr. Kisner.
So
but
at
I'll
one
see if
point in
I-
time, somebody mentioned to me that we didn't have, that there was no money for librarians in the schools anymore. Do we have schools with librarians?
We do not have any, with the exception of Preston High School.
Okay, okay. But there could be software that is still used in the library.
We used following software, which, I don't know, but what was the verbiage on that again, library?
It was
safe?
Career Safe, Career Safe LLC for $16,000.
Right. Yeah, I said several schools use Pollock. Library safe, what was that again?
Career Safe LLC. And I can just send an email, Ms. Kerstetter, is fine.
Okay.
You don't need, I just received.
What was the amount?
16,147. And it's designated as library license.
I think that possibly could be our Follett licensing, it just may not be construed as such. That amount would seem for the number of schools that would entail, would be approximate, but I'll find out.
Okay. Thank you, Mr.
Library
Sarver.
license.
Okay. Anything else? Call for the vote? I'll let you. I'm sorry.
That's all right. Voting's open. Motion passes 4-0.
Moving on, just for discussion information, is the maintenance work orders. Any questions or comments on that? Anything again positive? I think, talking about the maintenance work orders, Mrs. Durr gave a perfect example of how it is working. Even though I know it was an emergency scenario, but it's a good example that it is working and that helps. So again, thank you to them. Moving on. Next item is the bid for the architectural services for major improvement project with the West Virginia School Building Authority at Preston High School. So at this time, I entertain a motion to recommend the board approve Thrasher Engineering for architectural services, including design and all paperwork associated with the SBA for designing the major improvement project that includes a safe entryway at Preston High School.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Kisner, second by Mr. Tatum. Questions, comments, discussion?
So, we are required by the school building authority to hire an architect in this instance. Thrasher was the only bidding vendor. And Thrasher actually has assisted the board with this actually presentation to the board. Thrasher has been the engineer that's assisted with us, our submission to the SBA on multiple occasions. They're also the primary architect for Preston High School, so at this point, they're the only available service, and we are required, in order to carry out the project, we must have an architect hired.
So we don't have to have a minimum number of people bid, just if one bids, that's the one that we get.
But Thrasher's also approved.
Yes.
That makes sense.
Thrasher was hired, for example, to work with the Summer Comprehensive Educational Facilities
But
Plan.
I mean, they're approved by the state as well.
Their bid did not include any amounts, right? Like your supplemental
They
attached.
never did them across, they just simply put out there the services rendered. I mean, they have an hourly wage, but not, the presentation, even when they bid for the comprehensive education facilities, it didn't avail.
So if we had a second bid, how would we compare them if there's no amounts?
We would have to interview them. And like, when we did the comprehensive education facilities plan, we interviewed, I think, 4 firms.
Okay.
It was like Thrasher, Alpha, Williams and Shriver, and I can't remember, I believe it was.
Thank
But
you.
this instance, it was there was public notification that
Right.
they only current bidder.
Anything else? Call for the vote.
Voting's open. Motion passes 4-0.
Moving on, the bids for demolition of bleachers at West Preston Football Field. Entertain a motion to recommend the board approve the bid by Brown's Mill LP Service Incorporation of $10,077.75 to demolish the bleachers at West Preston Football Field, remove the debris, and remediate the site on completion of work.
I make that motion.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Tatham, second by Ms. Feathers. Questions or comments? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Voting's open. Motion passes 4-0. Mr. Huggins, we'll make sure to communicate with the city of Masontown in regards to any prospective work. We'll also be in communication with the youth football organization to ensure that we're obviously going to try to line work with them with their ability to finish out, but we're going to have to work to see what they can do to get on with work, but we'll certainly communicate with them.
When we do that, is there anything that just did they see at the appropriate time?
Well,
you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
One of the things I always hate is that the government paves a road or has a road painted and they pave it the next month. If I could request that we try to be smarter than government.
If we would get adequate weather in October, I mean, it's possible.
Right.
But if it gets beyond that, we'll have to come in and do it.
I just request that their seating and straw be at an appropriate time.
I'll tell you, the Central I was very pleased with the work when the Central Preston bleachers were,
Yeah.
I thought the remediation efforts there, that was a pretty challenging project to raise the hill as well.
I think their bids compared to others would indicate the community.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? That they are putting something towards the community as opposed to this being a profitable job. That's what I think I would take from this.
I would agree.
Okay, moving on, bids for the parking lot sealing and coating at Central Preston Middle School, West Preston, and South Preston. This time I entertain a motion to recommend the board approve the bids of $8,814.72 for the sealing and coating of the parking lot at South Preston, $10,080 for the sealing and coating of the parking lot at Central Preston Middle School, and $7,720 for the sealing and coating of the parking lot at West Preston.
What number did you mention for the first school?
The recommend approve the bids of $8,814.72.
For what school was that?
South Preston.
South
Oh,
Preston.
South
But
Preston.
that doesn't align with the lowest bid.
That doesn't show what's on here.
It doesn't align with the,
I think the way that the motion
Content.
was made, the recommended action may be written incorrect, I think is what he's saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, the biz.
first amount should be the same as the third.
Maybe there's something else we're missing.
Yeah, I just read the motion.
Right, that's, yeah.
Just trying to, maybe revise that motion, I was putting in the amount, so.
Okay.
The 7720 is what is in the supporting document.
Yes, the supporting document, I apologize, guys, that's a typographical, I was looking for, it's 7,000.
South 7,725, right?
Yep.
$7,725 in South Preston. All of the low bids were from public.
Right.
Okay, so I need to reread that, or we need to?
Mr. Evans, if you-
Nobody's approved it or
I
seconded.
was gonna say, if you would allow just for me to make the modification to the existing motion.
Okay, so I need to reread it again. Recommend the board approve the bids of
$7,725.
for the sealing and coating of the parking lot at South Preston, $10,080 for the sealing and coating of the parking lot at Central Preston Middle School, and $7,720 the sealing and coating of the parking lot at West Preston
Yep.
School. I'll entertain a motion for
I'll
that.
make that motion.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Feathers, second by Mr. Tatum. Any questions or discussion? Thank you for finding that. Hearing none, call for the vote.
What's that, you know?
Motion by Feathers, second by Mr.
I'll
Tatum.
follow your drop speed limit, or you can follow me because I drop speed.
Voting is open. Motion passes 4-0.
Okay, closing business, the only thing we've got left to do is adjourn, but we know we have one item added on to the next. Again, Mr. Knox and your LSIC, thank you for hosting us tonight and providing us food. I know Miss Moran just disappeared, but I don't know where she went, but thank you for including us in everything that you did.
I just want to publicly acknowledge also, I said it all through the school during the tour, but it is very obvious that there's a lot of pride in this school, and just hats off to your custodians, it's time for bed. Your custodians, your staff, and even your students. I was expecting when I went down the middle school wing, and I'm like, okay, yeah, middle schoolers, they're slobs. Just as pristine as the K through, or kindergarten preschool. So, thank you for taking pride and exuding that to your students and
We
staff.
have a wonderful staff here and.
It shows,
really good
yeah.
kids.
Shows. Thank you again for hosting and for the food. Sorry we kept you all up.
Past our bedtime.
Yeah.
Mr. Martin, I'm sorry, I didn't find a good place to interject during your superintendent's report, but.
There wasn't.
Was there a reason why school was off on Monday, the 3rd, instead of during the Buckwheat Festival when we have so many kids already out? Was there a?
It's
is
the
there a-
Mr. Kidner, I mean, the calendar was established last year and voted approved by the board,
Yeah.
so at this
I
juncture.
just was at, yeah, I just didn't know if there was an intentional
Mr.
thing there.
Martin,
but-
the faculty senate date has to be in
It has to be in
October.
October as well.
Okay,
That's
and that makes sense.
that's-
And then just, and we can talk about this afterwards actually, but are you aware that Caraz will be out without power on that Monday, the 3rd?
The only school I have been notified was Rollsburg, and we had made arrangements for Rollsburg area students to be at the Bellisville building. I was not aware that there was an issue.
Well, my office was told, and then an office, or a business on the other side of the school, so you may want to check
I'll
into
follow
that.
up with
Just
with
kidding.
Rick Myers without being.
Sorry,
No,
that's a side note.
No, that's definitely,
But-
no, that's the case.
But I don't think from 8 AM to 2 PM that you're gonna have power at the school, or
If
at
that's,
least
yeah, if
some
that's the case,
interruptions.
we're gonna have to look at other alternatives.
Sorry, that was my
No,
last interjection.
Good to know.
That was an important call, man. Especially if you be a,
Oh, did Cross say
especially if you could be a teacher, I'm a teacher.
I just want you to know, you sounded surprised.
I didn't mean that.
You
way.
sounded
Listen.
surprised.
Okay.
Cross,
We'll
did
now-
you say something?
We will now entertain a motion for German.
I will make that motion. Second.
Properly moved in second. Any comments? Hearing none, call for the vote.
That was quick.
I was.
It's not the company.
You didn't give us much chance for discussion.
Not for, because Ms. Feathers a lot of times used to vote no.
Yeah, no.
I apologize.
Not today.
Thank you, ladies, again,
Yes, very much.
for your hospitality.